Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where your smartphone becomes a useless brick, your sneakers disintegrate under relentless sun, and the nearest hospital is literally 4,000 miles away. You're standing at the edge of the Silk Road. Not the romantic, Instagram-filtered version with camels posing at sunset, but the actual unforgiving trade route that chewed up adventurers and spat out their bones across 2 continents. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, like why ancient merchants wrote wills before leaving home, or why certain desert stretches still echo with unexplained sounds. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below. But make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Tell me where you're watching from tonight, whether you're cozy in bed or listening while the rain taps your window. Maybe share what draws you to these historical journeys. Your words fuel these midnight adventures. Now let's keep the lights as soft as possible, turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a dawn that feels like opening an oven door. The year is 1289, and you've somehow joined a merchant caravan leaving from Xi'an, heading west towards Samarkand. Your modern clothes vanished the moment you arrived, replaced by scratchy wool robes that already smell like camel and desperation. Around you, 40 merchants check their loads of silk, porcelain, and tea. They eye you with suspicion because you don't speak proper Tang Chinese. You don't know how to secure a load, and your soft hands scream liability. The caravan master, a weathered man named Chen who's missing 3 fingers from previous journeys, walks past and spits near your feet. Not at you, just near you. It's a test. In this culture, how you react to casual disrespect determines whether you're worth protecting when bandits attack. You say nothing, which is either wisdom or cowardice. Chen grunts and moves on. You've passed. Barely. The first shock hits when the caravan actually departs. There's no countdown, no everyone ready announcement. One moment you're standing there, the next moment the lead camels are moving, and if you're not attached to the chain of pack animals, you're simply left behind. You scramble to grab your assigned rope, tethered to a foul-tempered Bactrian camel who's already trying to bite you. Historians still argue whether camels were actually bred to be this malicious, or if centuries of Silk Road labour simply broke their spirits into pure spite. The city walls of Xi'an shrink behind you, and with them disappears every safety net you've ever known. No police, no emergency services, no calling for help. You are now subject to the only law that matters on the Silk Road, the law of survival, negotiated moment by moment with nature, with fellow travellers, and with your own rapidly depleting will to continue. By hour 3, your feet are screaming. The leather boots they gave you, supposedly broken in, are medieval torture devices designed to maximize blister formation. You try to adjust your gait, but the sand makes every step unpredictable. Sometimes firm, sometimes giving way like snow. The merchants around you maintain a brutal pace, and you realize this is the slow, comfortable part of the journey. They're saving energy for later. The landscape transforms from farmland to scrubland to something that looks like Mars had a baby with a gravel pit. The Gobi Desert doesn't announce itself with a sign. It just gradually becomes everything. Vegetation gives up. Water stops pretending to exist. The horizon shimmers with heat, and you learn that mirages aren't just optical illusions, they're psychological warfare. 3 times you swear you see a lake, 3 times you're wrong. A quirky fact that might keep you sane: Ancient Silk Road travelers believed that desert mirages were actually glimpses into parallel dimensions where water spirits lived. They'd pour out small offerings of their precious drinking water to appease these spirits, which sounds insane until you remember that hope, even irrational hope, keeps you walking when logic says to lie down and die. Your water ration for the day is handed out at dawn, one leather bladder that holds maybe 2 modern water bottles worth. You think you'll be careful. You'll ration it perfectly. But by noon, you've already drained half because your body is leaking moisture from every pore. Salt stains bloom on your wool like crystalline flowers. Your lips crack. Your tongue swells slightly. This is dehydration's opening act, and you're only 6 hours into day 1. Around you, experienced merchants have wrapped their heads in elaborate cloth configurations that leave only their eyes exposed. You tried to mimic them this morning and failed. Your head wrap unravelled within an hour, leaving your neck exposed to sun that feels personal in its hostility. One merchant woman, probably in her 50s but looking 70, takes pity on you during a brief rest stop. Without words, she reties your head covering properly, her calloused fingers moving with the muscle memory of 10,000 previous wrappings. You try to thank her in Mandarin. She responds in Persian. You both shrug. Kindness needs no translation, though on the Silk Road it's rationed as carefully as water. The mainstream historical fact you need to understand: the Silk Road wasn't a single road. It was a sprawling network of routes spanning over 4,000 miles, connecting China to the Mediterranean across some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. The name itself is modern. A German geographer coined it in 1877. Ancient travellers just called it the way west, or the way east, depending on which direction they were trudging. And trudging is the operative word. You might cover 15 miles on a good day, 20 if you're suicidal. The journey from one end to the other could take 2 years. 2 years. As the sun finally begins its descent, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple that would be beautiful if you weren't so thoroughly miserable, the caravan master calls a halt. You've walked roughly 12 miles. Your legs are rubber, your feet are hamburger. You collapse near a scraggly Saxall bush, one of the few plants suicidal enough to grow here, and you understand the first great truth of the Silk Road. Distance is measured not in miles, but in suffering. Today's 12 miles contain more hardship than a modern person experiences in a month. Someone starts a fire using dried camel dung. The smell is exactly what you'd imagine. Dinner is millet porridge with a suspicious chunk of preserved meat that might be goat, or might be something that ate a goat. You're too hungry to care. The merchants eat in silence, saving energy, and you learn another rule. Conversation is a luxury. Words cost calories. Save your breath for breathing. As darkness falls completely, and it falls here like a curtain, not gradually but absolutely, the temperature plummets 40 degrees in under an hour. You're shivering in the same wool that was suffocating you at noon. Someone throws you a felt blanket that smells like it's been composting. You wrap it around yourself and lie down on sand that's somehow both hard and shifting. Above you, the stars are obscene in their abundance. The Milky Way looks like someone spilled cream across black silk. In any other circumstance, it would be transcendent. Right now, it just reminds you how small you are, how far you are from anything resembling help, and how monumentally unprepared you are for the 100+ days still ahead. You close your eyes, but sleep won't come easily. Your body is cataloguing injuries, blisters on both heels, sunburn on your neck, a persistent headache from dehydration, muscles you didn't know existed all filing formal complaints. And this was a good day. No bandits, no sandstorms, no one died. Tomorrow, Chen says, you reach the first water source. If it hasn't dried up, if another caravan hasn't contaminated it, if the local warlord is still allowing passage, you're 12 miles into a 4,000-mile journey, and you're already understanding why most Silk Road merchants made this trip exactly once in their lives, if they made it at all. You wake to someone kicking your feet, not maliciously, just efficiently. Dawn hasn't fully broken, but the caravan is already moving. You scramble up, your body protesting every movement with creative new pains. The blisters on your heels have apparently invited friends. You limp toward your camel, who greets you with a threatening gurgle that sounds like a diesel engine dying. Today's promise is water. Real water. The oasis of Anxi lies roughly 8 miles ahead, and you can feel the anticipation rippling through the caravan like electricity. Water on the Silk Road isn't a commodity, it's currency, politics, warfare, and religion all mixed together. The merchants discuss it in hushed, reverent tones, the way people back home might discuss winning lottery numbers. Chen explains through broken gestures and a translator that Anxi is controlled by a local magistrate who's recently tripled his water tax. Apparently his cousin 2 oases east charges less, which has created what historians still argue whether to call an economic dispute or an actual water war, though when the disputes involve armed men and the occasional corpse floating in a cistern, the distinction seems academic. You arrive at Anxi around mid-morning, and your first glimpse of the oasis is genuinely religious. Palm trees, actual green things, a pool of water that sparkles like crushed diamonds. Your legs want to run toward it. The caravan master's hand on your shoulder stops you cold. Wait, someone translates. Protocol. The oasis belongs to Magistrate Wu, whose compound overlooks the water like a fortress. And it essentially is a fortress. Mud brick walls, armed guards, and a gate that remains closed while Wu's representative assesses the caravan. This assessment takes an hour. You stand in the sun, staring at water you cannot touch, while a bureaucrat with an abacus calculates exactly how much misery he can extract from your desperation. The mainstream historical fact: oases along the Silk Road were essentially medieval gas stations with monopoly power. A single water source could serve as the only reliable supply for 100 miles in any direction. Whoever controlled it controlled the route. Magistrates, warlords, tribal chiefs, and enterprising bandits all understood this fundamental truth. Some oases changed hands 12 times in a decade, each new owner adjusting the tax structure to maximize profit before the next violent management transition. Wu's price is announced: 2 bolts of silk per camel, plus a separate security fee that's basically protection money dressed in administrative language. Chen negotiates, but it's theatre. Everyone knows he'll pay. The alternative is dying of thirst 8 miles back, which somehow seems even more stupid than dying in a proper desert. At least there, you could claim you were too far from water. Here, you can see it, smell it, watch it sparkle and mock you. Payment made, the caravan is allowed to approach the main pool. This is where you learn the brutal hierarchy of water access. The richest merchants drink first directly from the cleanest source, a stone cistern fed by an underground spring. The middle-class merchants use the pool where the cistern overflows. You, as a newcomer with no status, get to fill your bladder from the runoff where the pool drains into an irrigation ditch, and you're grateful. That's the part that stings. You're genuinely grateful to drink water that has camel spit, algae, and probably several species of bacteria that won't be scientifically identified for 7 centuries. You fill your leather bladder trying not to think about what you're seeing floating in there. A merchant beside you notices your hesitation and laughs, a sound like grinding rocks. "First time?" he asks in accented Mandarin. You nod. He points to a small fabric pouch on his belt. "Charcoal pieces. You chew them. Helps with the consequences." "The consequences, you'll learn tonight, involve your digestive system staging a violent rebellion. But right now you're drinking, and it's glorious. The water tastes like minerals, mud, and camel, but it's wet and it's cooling your core temperature from fatal down to merely dangerous." A quirky tidbit. Ancient travellers developed elaborate rituals for determining water safety. Some believed you should always let your camel drink first. If the camel refused, the water was poisoned or cursed. Others insisted you should toss in a silver coin. If it tarnished quickly, don't drink. Most practical was the wait and watch method. See if the first caravan members to drink started showing symptoms before you took your turn. Democracy in action. While the caravan rests, you explore Anxi's small market. It's barely a dozen stalls, but they sell things you never knew you needed. Camel hair rope that won't chafe as badly, felt boot liners to cushion your destroyed feet, dried apricots that cost more per ounce than silver back home. One vendor sells genuine snake oil, and yes, it's actually made from snakes, and yes, people swear it works for joint pain. You're skeptical until your knees remind you they exist. You buy a small vial. Desperation erases skepticism faster than any argument. The more disturbing discovery is the slave pen. It's tucked behind the magistrate's compound, almost hidden, but you can hear it. Low moaning, chains rattling. A guard notices your attention and grins with half his teeth missing. "Travellers who couldn't pay," he explains cheerfully in a language you barely understand. "Work off their debt, or get sold east, or west. Depends on the market." You back away slowly, and suddenly Chen's insistence on paying Wu's extortionate water tax makes perfect sense. This isn't just commerce, it's survival economics with no safety net. Can't pay? You become the payment. The caravan prepares to depart after only 3 hours rest. Wu doesn't allow overnight stays unless you pay an additional camping fee that would bankrupt most merchants. It's a brilliant racket. He controls the water, which means he controls the rest schedule, which means he controls who survives and who becomes inventory for his other business ventures. As you're filling your water bladder for the last time, an old woman approaches. She's local, weathered like driftwood, and she's selling something from a clay jar. "Protection," she says in Mandarin so old-fashioned it takes you a moment to pass. She pulls out what looks like a dried frog wrapped in cloth. "From the water spirits. They're angry this season. Magistrate Wu took too much from the spring. The spirits will revenge. It's superstition, obviously." But you think about those chains rattling in the slave pen, about water as a weapon, about Wu's armed guards, and you realize that whether the spirits are real or not, the anger is. Somebody's going to revenge something eventually. You buy the dried frog for a copper coin you probably can't afford to spend. The old woman wraps it carefully and whispers instructions you don't fully catch. Something about burying it at the next water source, or maybe burning it, or possibly eating it. Your Mandarin isn't good enough to be sure. The caravan leaves Anxi heading northwest. Your bladders are full, but your coin purses are lighter. Chen looks worried, which worries everyone else. Next water is Dun Huang, someone tells you. 3 days if we're lucky, 4 if we're not, 5 if we're cursed. You do the math. Your leather bladder holds maybe 2 litres. Maybe. You need roughly 3 litres a day in this heat to avoid serious dehydration. The deficit is obvious. You'll be rationing starting tomorrow, getting thirstier each day and praying that Dunhuang's wells haven't dried up, that the local warlord is accepting travellers, that no sandstorm delays you, that your calculations aren't optimistic fantasies. Historians still argue whether the Silk Road's water politics shaped Central Asian power structures or merely reflected them. Did control of oases create dynasties? Or did dynasties secure oases to legitimize existing power? The answer probably doesn't matter when you're walking into day 2 of a 3-day desert crossing with insufficient water and a dried frog you might have to eat. By afternoon, Anxi is a shimmer on the horizon behind you, then a memory, then a myth. The desert reasserts itself as the only reality that matters. You check your water bladder obsessively. Every hour, then every 30 minutes, then every time your throat feels dry, which is constantly. You've already drunk more than you planned for today. The mathematics of thirst don't care about your plans. That night, camp feels tenser. The merchants huddle in small groups, speaking in low voices about water sources ahead. You overhear fragments. Heard the Yellow River change course again. Dunhuang wells were poisoned last month. Some bandit dispute. Maybe we should detour south. Add 5 days, but there's a reliable spring. No decisions are made. Chen will decide in the morning based on intelligence from other caravans, on instinct, on divination, on whatever combination of factors keeps 400 years of caravan masters whispering advice from their graves. You lie down on sand that's already cold, wrapped in your fetid blanket, and you realize that you've been thinking about water every 5 minutes for the past 12 hours. Not metaphorically, literally. Your consciousness has reorganized itself around hydration like a planet around a sun. Everything else, home, comfort, your previous life, orbits distantly. Tomorrow you'll wake up thirstier, and the day after, thirstier still. This is the mathematics of the Silk Road, where water is never a given, always a negotiation, and sometimes a prayer that may or may not be answered. You touch the dried frog in your pocket. The old woman's words echo. The spirits are angry this season. You're starting to understand why. Morning arrives with Chen's boot against your ribs, gentler than yesterday, but still not what you'd call a wake-up call. You're learning that the caravan operates on a hierarchy as rigid as any medieval court, and you're discovering your place in it, somewhere between the pack animals and the actual merchants. Not quite livestock, but definitely not people whose opinions matter. The caravan structure reveals itself more clearly today. At the front, Chen and 5 other senior merchants who've survived at least 3 complete crossings. They ride the best camels, carry the most valuable silk, and make every significant decision without consulting anyone. Behind them, the middle-tier merchants, maybe 20 people who've made the journey once before and lived to regret it enough to try again. They carry tea, porcelain, lesser silks, and moderate amounts of hope. Then there's you and about 15 other newcomers, prisoners of our own poor life choices. You haul the heavy, breakable or unsellable goods, ceramic pots, iron tools, bundles of raw wool that somehow weigh more each day. Your camels are the ornery ones, the biters and spitters who've been retired from premium service, but aren't quite ready for the glue factory. You walk at the caravan's rear where the dust is thickest, the pace most punishing, and the attention from leadership non-existent unless you're actively dying. The mainstream historical fact: Silk Road caravans operated like mobile dictatorships because anything else meant death. Democracy doesn't work when bandits attack. Committees don't function during sandstorms. Chen's word is law because the alternative is 40 people arguing about which direction to flee while arrows find their backs. You obey or you're cut loose. and being cut loose in the Gobi Desert is just execution with extra steps. Today's lesson in hierarchy comes at the first rest stop. You collapse in the shade of your camel, a questionable shade but better than nothing, and pull out a dried apricot you purchased in Anxi. You're fantasizing about its sweetness when a middle-tier merchant named Zhang walks over and simply takes it from your hand. Not violently, just takes it, eats it, walks away. You look around for support, justice, someone to acknowledge this petty theft. The other newcomers avoid eye contact. An older woman whispers in accented Persian, "You are new. He is not. This is the way." It's not hunger that burns. The apricot was a luxury anyway. It's the casual reminder that you have no power, no recourse, no rights beyond what the hierarchy grants. Zhang took your apricot because he could, and because establishing dominance now means you won't challenge him on something important later. It's brilliant and cruel, and probably taught in some medieval management seminar you never attended. Chen approaches during the midday break and you think maybe he's noticed the injustice. Maybe leadership will intervene. Instead, he assigns you additional duty, checking the camel's feet each evening for stones and injuries. This is actually several people's job, but one of the other newcomers, a young man from Samarkand, developed severe dysentery last night and can barely walk, so his responsibilities become yours. No discussion, no compensation, just more work. You want to protest. You want to explain that you're already exhausted, that your own feet are destroyed, that this isn't fair. But you watch the Samarkand man struggling to keep pace, pale and sweating, and you understand another truth. Fair doesn't exist on the Silk Road. There's only functional and dead weight. Stay functional or become the weight that gets cut. A quirky detail that makes the hierarchy slightly less awful. Caravan masters like Chen operate under their own code of honor that occasionally resembles justice. If you prove yourself useful and obedient, you earn marginal improvements in treatment. Complain or resist, and you'll find yourself assigned to the most dangerous positions. Rear guard where bandits strike first, or forward scout where you'll trigger any ambushes meant for the valuable cargo. It's not fair, but it's a system. Systems you can learn to navigate. By afternoon, your new duties reveal themselves as surprisingly educational. Checking camel feet teaches you which animals are genuinely dangerous versus merely dramatic. The old Bactrian assigned to you, you've named her Spite in your head, actually has a stone bruising her front left pad. You remove it carefully, expecting a bite. Instead, she makes a low gurgling sound that might be approval. The merchant who owns her notices, grunts something that could be thanks, and tosses you a strip of dried meat at dinner. This, you're learning, is how status inches upward. Tiny demonstrations of competence, small accumulations of favour, the gradual transformation from liability to acceptable. You're still at the bottom, but there's a theoretical ladder. Climb it or be crushed by it. The hierarchy extends beyond humans. Water distribution follows strict protocols you're only now understanding. When wells are plentiful, everyone drinks freely. But when water is scarce, which is most of the time, the rationing becomes mathematical and brutal. Senior merchants get full rations. Middle tier gets 3/4. You and the other newcomers get half. The logic is cold but sound. The experienced travellers are more valuable alive. They know the routes, the languages, the bribes. You're replaceable. The desert will produce more desperate, broke adventurers at the next city. Historians still argue whether this hierarchy was culturally specific or universal across trade routes. Did European caravans operate the same way? African trade networks? The scholarly debate continues, but you suspect the answer is obvious. Anywhere humans face death together, hierarchies emerge. It's not pretty, but it's predictable. That evening, the Samarkand man with dysentery can't continue. He's shaking, delirious, and has lost perhaps 15 pounds in 24 hours. Chen examines him with the tenderness of someone inspecting a broken tool. Not cruel, just practical. The diagnosis is delivered in emotionless Mandarin. He will die if he continues. He will die if he stays. His choice. The man chooses to stay. Chen leaves him with a half bladder of water, a blanket, and directions to a settlement that might be 30 miles south. Might. The man's odds are approximately 0 and everyone knows it, but this mercy allows him to die hoping rather than die knowing. The caravan moves on within minutes. You keep walking, processing the calculus. The man owned 2 camels and various goods. Chen has already redistributed them. The camels to merchants who can manage extra animals, the goods divided among those who have capacity. Nothing is wasted. The efficiency is admirable and horrifying in equal measure. That night you perform your camel foot duties with extra attention, paranoid that any mistake might reclassify you from useful to expendable. Spike cooperates, which you interpret as progress. Zhang, the apricot thief, watches you work and nods slightly. It's not an apology, but it might be acknowledgement. You're learning the language of the hierarchy. Gestures replace words, competence replaces contracts, and yesterday's victim can become tomorrow's, well, not friend, but perhaps person who won't actively sabotage you. See, around the fire, a senior merchant tells a story about a caravan 20 years ago, where 3 newcomers conspired to steal water from the common supply. They were discovered, and Chen's predecessor, a man known as Chen the Elder, simply left all 3 behind with nothing. No trial, no debate, no mercy. The story is told casually, like discussing the weather, but its purpose is educational. The hierarchy protects you if you honour it, betray it, and the desert handles your punishment. You lie down that night thinking about the Samarkand man, alone in the darkness, waiting for death or miracle. You think about your stolen apricot, your bruised ribs from Chen's morning wake-ups, your half rations of water, and your place at the caravan's rear breathing everyone else's dust. And here's the strangest part. You're grateful. Grateful to be included at all. Grateful that Chen still considers you worth waking. Grateful for the hierarchy, because without it, you'd be the one sitting in the sand with half a bladder of water and imaginary directions to safety. The Silk Road doesn't break you with drama. It breaks you with the slow realization that you'll accept almost anything. Abuse, theft, brutal rationing, watching others die, if the alternative is being left behind. You touch Spite's rope, feeling her breathing nearby. She's your tether to usefulness, your evidence of value. Keep her healthy, keep yourself functional, and maybe the hierarchy lets you survive. The stars wheel overhead, indifferent to human pyramids of power. Somewhere behind you, the Samarkand man stares at the same stars. Alone, you close your eyes and try not to imagine what that loneliness sounds like. The Taklamakan Desert announces itself not with a sign, but with the sound. You first hear it around noon on the 3rd day after leaving Anxi, a low, persistent hum that you mistake for tinnitus or exhaustion, or maybe the beginning of heat stroke. But the sound grows, and you realize it's coming from outside your head. The sand itself is singing. Chen calls a halt, which is unusual. Midday stops waste precious cool hours of evening travel, but the senior merchants are all staring at the dunes ahead, their faces showing something you haven't seen before. Fear. Not the manageable anxiety of bandits or water shortage, but primal, superstitious dread. One elderly merchant pulls out prayer beads and begins muttering in a language you don't recognize. Mingsha Shan, someone whispers behind you. The singing sands. The dunes that moan and howl and, according to legend, remember every caravan that died crossing them. The sound intensifies as you approach, a harmonic resonance that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, like the desert itself is breathing, groaning, warning. The mainstream historical fact. The Taklamakan Desert is the second largest shifting sand desert in the world, covering over 130,000 square miles of the Tarim Basin. Its name translates approximately to "go in and you won't come out," which is the sort of honest marketing you have to respect. Medieval merchants called it the Sea of Death. Marco Polo described it as haunted by evil spirits who lured travellers to their doom with phantom sounds and false visions. Modern science explains the singing as wind passing through sand particles of specific sizes, creating vibrations. But science doesn't make the sound less unsettling when you're 300 miles from civilization. The singing intensifies as your caravan enters the dune fields proper. It's not constant. It rises and falls like breathing, sometimes fading to nothing, then suddenly swelling to a pitch that vibrates in your chest. Your camel, Spite, doesn't like it. She keeps trying to veer south, away from the sound, and you have to constantly correct her. Other animals are more agitated, braying and attempting to bolt. The merchants maintain discipline, but you can feel the collective anxiety building like atmospheric pressure before a storm. By afternoon, the mirages begin. You've seen heat shimmers before, but these are different. More persistent, more detailed, more convincing. You see a city on the horizon, complete with towers and walls and what looks like people moving along battlements. You blink. It's still there. You look away and back, still there. You point it out to the merchant beside you, a middle-aged woman from Kashgar who's done this crossing twice. She doesn't even look. Ignore it, she says flatly. Cities, oases, caravans, sometimes your own family calling to you. The desert lies. Walk straight. Trust Chen. Nothing else. But the city looks so real. You can see architectural details, arched doorways, tiled roofs catching sunlight. Your brain insists it's genuine because your brain didn't evolve to cope with optical phenomena this sophisticated. For 45 minutes you walk toward that city, watching it refuse to get closer, until finally it shimmers and dissolves like a soap bubble made of hope and desperation. A quirky detail that makes the situation worse. Ancient travellers believed the Taklamakan was inhabited by jinn, malevolent spirits who created illusions to lure caravans off route into the deepest, most waterless sections where death was guaranteed. Some merchants hired religious specialists to travel with them, holy men who would perform protective rituals and identify which visions were jinn-made versus simple heat distortion. Historians still argue whether these specialists were spiritual practitioners or early psychologists who understood that group panic kills as efficiently as dehydration. Either way, your caravan lacks one, which means everyone navigates their own visions with their own crumbling sanity. The singing grows louder as evening approaches. Now it's accompanied by what sounds like voices, distant conversations, laughter, sometimes screaming. You know intellectually that it's wind and sand and acoustic tricks, but your lizard brain isn't intellectual. Your lizard brain says people are out there, just beyond the dunes, and maybe they need help, or maybe they're warning you, or maybe they're the ghosts of previous caravans still wandering, still dying forever. Chen orders camp made in a depression between two massive dunes. The singing is less intense here. muffled by the sand walls, but it's still audible, a constant reminder that you're camping in the throat of something vast and hungry. The senior merchants perform a ritual you haven't seen before. They hammer wooden stakes into the sand in a wide circle around the camp, tying red cloth strips to each stake. Protective barrier, territory marker, psychological comfort. No one explains, and you don't ask. Dinner is tense and quiet. Even the usual camp sounds, conversations, equipment being sorted, camels complaining, are muted, as if everyone's afraid of adding to the desert's song and making it worse. You eat your ration of millet and mystery meat while watching the dunes. As darkness falls, they transform into something almost alive, their curves and shadows suggesting enormous sleeping creatures that might wake at any moment. The woman from Kashgar notices you're staring. "First time in the singing sands," she observes. It's not a question. Some advice. If you hear your name called tonight, don't answer. Don't investigate. Don't leave the red stakes. People who do, she trails off, staring at her bowl. They find them sometimes miles off route, buried to the neck. Always facing the wrong direction. Always with that expression. You want to ask what expression, but you also desperately don't want to know. She continues anyway, like they saw something wonderful just before they died. That's what the jinn do. They show you the thing you want most, and you follow it until you can't follow anymore. Sleep is difficult. The singing continues through the night, and now your brain, primed by the Kashgar woman's stories, interprets every shift in pitch as something meaningful. Around midnight, you hear what sounds exactly like your mother calling your name. The voice is perfect, the specific inflection she uses when worried about you. Your body reacts before your mind can intervene, sitting up, scanning the darkness beyond the stakes. The voice comes again, more urgent. You actually stand up, which is when a hand grabs your ankle. It's one of the other newcomers, a young man from Dunhuang who hasn't spoken to you before. "Sit down," he hisses. "That's not real. Your mother is 1,000 miles away. That's sand and wind and your own fear." He's right, obviously, but the voice sounds so genuine. You sit back down, shaking, and spend the next hour listening to your mother call for you from various directions, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry, always heartbreakingly familiar. Eventually the voice gives up and moves on. You hear it later, farther away, calling a name in Persian, someone else's torment. Dawn arrives like a pardon. The singing quiets, not silence, but reduced to manageable levels. Chen breaks camp quickly, clearly eager to move. As you're loading Spite, you notice footprints leading out from the red stake perimeter into the dunes. Small feet, probably a child's. They go about 50 yards before disappearing where the sand shifts. No one mentions them. No one goes to investigate. You count heads compulsively and get the same number as yesterday. So whose footprints? A previous caravan? Something else? The questions chase each other in circles, and you realize that's the desert's weapon. Not killing you directly, but filling your head with unanswerable dread until you make a fatal mistake. The second day in the Singing Sands is worse because now you know what's coming. The mirages grow more elaborate. Entire caravans appear, travelling parallel to yours, complete with merchants who wave and call greetings. You wave back before catching yourself, feeling foolish and unsettled. Are they waving at your group, or are you part of someone else's mirage? Can mirages see each other? Does it matter? Around noon you see bodies. 3 of them, half buried in a dune about 100 yards off route. They're clearly dead. The posture's wrong, the stillness absolute. But they're also perfectly preserved by the dry heat, which makes them look almost alive, just sleeping. One is sitting upright, arms wrapped around knees facing west. The others are sprawled like they fell mid-stride. Chen doesn't stop, doesn't even slow. You want to ask, who were they? Should we bury them? Check for survivors even though survival is impossible. But you remember the hierarchy. Remember your place. Remember that questions from newcomers are rarely welcome. So you walk past the dead, adding their silent testimony to your growing understanding. The Taklamakan doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about your preparations, your prayers, or your intentions. It simply waits for mistakes. That night, the singing reaches a crescendo that makes conversation impossible. You have to shout to be heard over the harmonic moaning of millions of tons of sand rubbing against itself in frequencies that bypass your ears and vibrate directly in your bones. No one tells stories. No one performs protective rituals. Everyone just endures, waiting for morning, hoping the sound doesn't trigger a panic stampede that would scatter the caravan like seeds in the wind. You lie down with your hands over your ears, which helps exactly 0, and you understand why Marco Polo wrote about evil spirits. Calling this phenomenon wind and sand feels like calling a hurricane weather. Technically accurate, but missing the existential dread, the psychological assault, the way the desert seems to have personality and intention and hunger. Somewhere in the singing you hear your name again. This time you don't even flinch. Not real, you whisper to yourself, just fear with acoustics. But as you finally drift into exhausted sleep, one thought follows you down. What if some of those voices are real? What if people do wander off and call for help, and everyone assumes it's just another desert lie? You'll never know. And that uncertainty is its own kind of torture. You emerge from the singing sands on the morning of the 4th day feeling like you've survived something supernatural, which makes you completely unprepared for the very human threat waiting at the next water stop. The oasis of Yumen appears on the horizon, real this time, not a mirage, with its cluster of mud brick buildings and blessed green trees. Your water ran out 6 hours ago, and your mouth tastes like copper and regret. Chen signals the caravan to halt a half-mile out. This is unusual enough to trigger alarm. Through the shimmering heat you can see figures moving near the oasis. Too many figures, too organized. Not the casual bustle of merchants and locals, but the purposeful arrangement of people who are expecting someone and have prepared accordingly. Bandits, the Kashgar woman mutters beside you. She doesn't sound surprised, just tired. Li Feng's crew, probably. He owns this route right now. Means we pay tribute or we die. Simple mathematics. The mainstream historical fact. Silk Road bandits weren't random criminals. They were sophisticated criminal enterprises with territorial claims, hierarchical structures, and what amounted to franchise operations. Leaders like Li Feng controlled specific oasis clusters, charging protection fees to caravans and violently eliminating competition. Some bandit chiefs became so wealthy and powerful, they transitioned into legitimate warlords, building armies and claiming noble titles. The line between bandit and governor was often just a matter of which taxes the current emperor recognized as legal. 3 riders approach from the oasis, moving at a casual pace that communicates absolute confidence. They're well-armed, curved swords, composite bows, and what looks like decent armour under their dust-covered robes. The lead rider is young, maybe 30, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow that gives his face a permanent expression of cruel amusement. He addresses Chen in fluid Mandarin. Chen the Younger, welcome back to Yumen. Your father paid promptly. I trust you inherited his wisdom along with his trade routes. Chen bows slightly. Not submission, but acknowledgement. Li Feng, your reputation reaches Xi'an. They say you're a man of honor who values living customers over dead examples. They say correctly. Li Feng walks his horse in a slow circle around Chen, appraising the caravan like a farmer evaluating livestock. 20 camels mixed cargo. You'll have silk. Everyone has silk. Also tea, yes? Perhaps jade, though you're smart enough to hide the good pieces. His eyes scan the caravan, and when they pass over you, you feel assessed and dismissed in a heartbeat. Not worth robbing personally. Barely worth acknowledging. Standard rate, Li Feng announces, 10% of cargo value. I provide security for the next 3 oases and ensure the wells remain unpoisoned. Alternatively, you decline. I take 70%, and whoever survives remembers that Li Feng's rates are negotiable only upward. The threat is delivered with such casual friendliness that it takes a moment to register. This isn't negotiation, it's theatre. Li Feng has 40 men stationed around the oasis. Your caravan has 40 people total, mostly merchants with minimal combat training. The mathematics are indeed simple. Chen doesn't hesitate. 10% is acceptable. I'll need verification of your current territorial range before agreeing to the security provision. Li Feng grins, showing teeth that have seen better decades. Smart. Chen the Elder taught you well. My range extends from Yumen to Dunhuang, west to Turpan. Beyond that, you'll negotiate with the Sogdian princes, who are less reasonable than me but more reasonable than the alternatives. A quirky detail that makes this robbery marginally more civilized. Established bandit chiefs like Li Feng operated under their own code of conduct. They charged consistent rates, provided genuine security within their territories, and honoured agreements with merchants who paid promptly. Betray that code. Rob a caravan that already paid, for instance, and other bandit chiefs would refuse to do business with you. Criminal enterprises need trust too, just pointing different directions. The tribute collection takes an hour. Li Feng's men are professionals. They inventory cargo efficiently, assess values accurately, and take exactly 10%. No petty theft, no random violence, no casual cruelty. It's organised crime at its most organised. You watch them load silk onto their own camels and realise they're essentially running a taxation system without the bureaucratic overhead. Historians still argue whether this made them parasites, or the closest thing to functional government the Silk Road had in many regions. One of Li Feng's men pauses near you, examining the ceramic pots you've been hauling. "This one's useless," he calls to his boss. "Pottery, wool, basic tools, barely worth the weight." You should feel insulted. Instead, you feel relieved. Being beneath notice is survival. Li Feng approaches Chen one more time before departing. Word of advice. Take the southern route around Lop Nur. Northern route has new management. Uyghur tribe that doesn't honour old agreements. They're killing first and negotiating with corpses. Very unprofessional. Chen nods appreciation. This advice is worth more than the silk. I know, that's why I'm giving it. Dead merchants don't make return trips. Bad for business. Li Feng wheels his horse and gallops back to the oasis, his men following in disciplined formation. The caravan proceeds to Yumen, now officially under Li Feng's protection, which means the other bandits watching from surrounding hills, and you can see them now, shapes on ridgelines that weren't there before, won't attack. The protection is real. You've paid for safety, and in this lawless corridor between empires you'll receive exactly what you purchased. At the oasis, you finally drink. The water here is better than Anxi, cleaner, colder, less obviously contaminated with camel excrement. Li Feng's men manage the oasis efficiently, maintaining the wells and charging reasonable rates for everything. They're bandits, yes, but they're running the operation better than many legitimate governors you've heard about. That evening, around the fire, the merchants discuss Li Feng with something approaching respect. "Could be worse," Zhang comments, still chewing the dried meat that probably came from your tribute portion. "Remember the Qiang raiders 3 years ago? They'd take your cargo, your camels, and your fingers as souvenirs. Li Feng just takes money and provides actual security. Almost honest." The Kashgar woman disagrees. He's still a parasite, takes value without creating it. But yes, he's a professional parasite. I suppose that's worth something. You ask the question that's been bothering you. What if we'd refused? What if Chen said no? The resulting silence lasts long enough to become uncomfortable. Finally, one of the senior merchants, an old man from Samarkand who's been quiet for days, speaks. 3 years ago, a caravan from Persia refused Li Feng's rate, thought they could fight. They had 30 armed guards, good weapons, strong camels. Li Feng burned them out of Yumen after dark, shot fire arrows into their supplies, stampeded their animals, picked them off in the chaos, found 17 bodies the next morning. The rest scattered into the desert. Maybe some survived. Probably not. Li Feng left the bodies unburied for a month, the Kashgar woman adds quietly. Educational display. The next 20 caravans paid without discussion. That's how you build a successful protection racket. One horrific example that buys you a year of compliance. You lie down that night thinking about Li Feng's casual professionalism, his polite threats, his genuine advice about the northern route. You're learning that the Silk Road doesn't divide neatly into good guys and bad guys. It's all gradients of exploitation, and the best you can hope for is competent exploitation rather than chaotic violence. Somewhere nearby, Li Feng's men patrol the perimeter. They're protecting you now. You paid for it. The fact that they're also the reason you need protection in the first place is a paradox you're too tired to unpack. Around midnight, shouting erupts from the oasis edge. You jolt awake, hand instinctively grabbing Spite's rope. But it's not an attack on your caravan. It's Li Feng's men intercepting someone else. Through the darkness you hear brief combat. The thunk of arrows, screaming that cuts off quickly, then silence. In the morning, there are 3 new bodies hung from posts at the oasis entrance. A sign written in multiple languages explains, "Freelance bandits, not approved. This is Li Feng's territory." The bodies will hang for days, warning others. You pass them on your way out, and you understand the full scope of the protection you purchased. Li Feng doesn't just promise not to rob you. He actively prevents others from doing so. It's feudalism condensed to its purest form. Pay tribute to the local strongman, receive his violence directed outward instead of inward. The caravan leaves Yumen heading toward Dunhuang. Chen looks satisfied, which means the 10% hurt less than death would have. The hierarchy has absorbed another cost, distributed it across cargo values, and moved forward because moving forward is the only option. You're 3 weeks into the journey, and you're learning that surviving the Silk Road isn't about avoiding danger. It's about budgeting for it, paying your way through it, and accepting that safety is just another commodity traded between people with power and people without. The desert stretches ahead, indifferent to human economics. But the humans aren't indifferent. Every oasis, every water source, every navigable pass has someone claiming ownership, collecting fees, and promising protection from threats they usually control anyway. It's efficient, it's brutal, and it works. You check your remaining supplies and calculate what you can afford at the next tribute point. The mathematics of exploitation are becoming second nature. Welcome to the Silk Road economy, where everyone's a customer and everyone's merchandise. The coughing starts 3 days after Yumen, and within hours it spreads through the caravan like fire through dry grass. First, it's the old Samarkand merchant, harsh, wet coughs that double him over. Then 2 middle-tier traders develop fevers. By evening, 7 people are showing symptoms: coughing, sweating, shivering despite the heat, and a distinctive smell that you can't quite identify but makes your stomach turn. Chen orders increased spacing between travellers. Everyone must stay at least 10 feet from others, which turns the caravan into a stretched-out procession of isolated suffering. You're terrified, because you don't know what this is, how it spreads, or whether you're already infected and just don't know it yet. The Kashgar woman, still healthy, explains in a whisper during a water break. Could be anything. Pneumonia from the temperature swings, influenza from the last oasis. Someone always brings it. Or, she pauses, lowering her voice further. Could be the beginning of plague. Won't know for a few days. If they develop swellings, we're all probably dead. The mainstream historical fact: the Silk Road was history's most efficient disease superhighway. The Black Death travelled along these routes in the 1340s, carried by fleas on rats that hitched rides in grain shipments, killing an estimated 75 to 200 million people across Eurasia. But plague wasn't the only passenger. Tuberculosis, smallpox, measles, typhus, dysentery, and diseases that no longer exist or were never properly identified, all moved east and west with the merchant caravans. You're walking through a medieval petri dish where every handshake, every shared water source, every communal meal is a potential death sentence. By the second day of illness, the old Samarkand merchant can barely walk. 2 others have developed the swellings, buboes in their armpits and groins, hard lumps the size of eggs that mean exactly what everyone fears. Chen calls a halt and makes the announcement in 3 languages. Plague confirmed. Infected individuals will be separated immediately. No contact, no exceptions. The 3 plague victims are moved to a separate camp 50 yards from the main group. They receive water and basic food, left at a distance and collected after the healthy retreat. No one speaks to them except by shouting across the gap. One of them, a young merchant from Kashgar, no relation to the woman in your group, starts crying, not from pain, though the buboes are agony, from understanding. He's 23 years old and he's already dead. The only question is whether he dies in 3 days or 5. You watch this quarantine established with brutal efficiency and realize you're witnessing medieval epidemiology at its pragmatic worst. No doctors, no antibiotics, no hope, just containment and prayer, and the cold calculation that 3 deaths are better than 40. That night, you obsessively check yourself for symptoms. Every throat tickle is potential plague. Every muscle ache is fever starting. You feel your armpits and groin repeatedly, searching for swellings until the Kashgar woman notices and tells you to stop. If you're infected, checking won't help. If you're not, you're just spreading panic. Control yourself. She's right, but controlling yourself is nearly impossible when death is quantifiable and 50 yards away. You lie down and try to sleep, but every sound from the quarantine camp, coughing, moaning, the one young merchant still crying, reinforces the paper-thin barrier between you and them. They were healthy 3 days ago. They drank from the same sources, walked the same paths, breathed the same air. A quirky detail that somehow makes this worse. Medieval travellers developed elaborate theories about plague transmission. Some believed it spread through eye contact with the infected. Others insisted it was God's punishment for specific sins, which meant piety could protect you. Some merchants wore birdbeak masks stuffed with aromatic herbs, believing bad smells caused disease. The herbs actually helped slightly, not by preventing plague, but by masking the death stench enough to reduce panic. Historians still argue whether these rituals provided placebo benefits that improved survival through stress reduction, or whether they just gave people something to do besides scream. The third day brings the first death. The old Samarkand merchant succumbs in the pre-dawn darkness. His body is wrapped in cloth immediately, using his own blankets, because no one will touch fabric that's been near plague, and buried in a shallow grave marked with stones. No ceremony, no prayers spoken close enough to matter. Just efficient disposal of contaminated material. The other two are still alive but deteriorating. The young Kashgar merchant has stopped crying, which might mean acceptance or might mean fever-induced delirium. The third, a middle-aged woman whose name you never learned, alternates between shivering and raging fever. You can see her from the main camp, occasionally thrashing, occasionally still as death herself. Chen announces the caravan will remain stationary for 3 more days. If no new cases develop, you'll proceed. If new symptoms appear, the waiting period resets. Time is cargo value evaporating in the desert sun, but plague spreading through the entire caravan is total loss. The mathematics favour caution. Those 3 days are psychological torture. Every merchant becomes a potential plague victim. Every cough triggers suspicion. You develop a genuine throat tickle, probably from dust and dry air, and spend 6 hours convinced you're infected before the symptom passes without escalating. The relief is overwhelming and short-lived. Tomorrow you might actually be infected. People start separating into smaller groups, self-segregating by perceived health status. The definitely healthy cluster together, avoiding anyone who's coughed even once. The probably healthy form their own anxious cluster. You're in the uncertain middle, neither obviously sick nor obviously well, which means both groups eye you with suspicion. On day 5, the second quarantine death occurs. The middle-aged woman dies during the night. Her burial is even more perfunctory than the first. A hole in the sand, rocks piled on top, no marker beyond a cairn that will disappear in the next sandstorm. The young Kashgar merchant is still alive, which is almost crueler. His buboes have ruptured, leaking fluid that should probably kill him through infection but hasn't yet. He's in constant agony, and everyone knows that shooting him with an arrow would be mercy. No one does. Mercy killing might anger God, spirits, or karmic balance. Better to let nature complete the process. The Kashgar woman, the healthy one from your group, walks closer to the quarantine camp than protocol allows. She and the dying man share a language and possibly hometown connections. They have a brief conversation in Persian that you don't understand, though the tone is clear. Goodbye, I'm sorry. May your next life be kinder. Then she returns to the main camp, face expressionless, and doesn't speak for the rest of the day. Day 7 brings the miracle that isn't quite miraculous. No new infections. Chen examines everyone personally, checking for fevers, buboes, or suspicious symptoms. His inspections are invasive and humiliating. He literally pokes your armpits and groin, checking for swellings. But no one complains. You want to be examined. You want confirmation that you're clean. The young Kashgar merchant dies on day 8, finally, mercifully. His grave joins the others. 3 people entered quarantine. 3 bodies now fertilized desert that will never produce anything. The caravan has shrunk from 40 to 37, and the absent members aren't just numbers. They're gaps in the rotation, missing expertise, lost labour that gets redistributed among survivors. Chen orders immediate departure, every moment stationary as resource depletion. The plague dead are already forgotten, not from cruelty but from necessity. Grief is a luxury afforded after survival is guaranteed. As you walk away from the 3 graves, you realize you don't remember the middle-aged woman's name. You shared campfires with her. She walked near you for weeks, but her name never registered, and now it never will. She's just the 3rd plague victim, reduced to function and failure. The Kashgar woman notices you staring back at the graves. Don't, she says quietly. Don't memorialize them. Don't carry their weight. The Silk Road has millions of graves. You can't honor them all, and trying will break you. She's right. But the casual pragmatism still feels monstrous. 3 people dead, erased, forgotten within hours. You want to protest, to insist they deserved better, to demand some ritual acknowledgement of their humanity. But you're learning that the Silk Road doesn't traffic in humanity. It traffics in silk, tea, and survival. Everything else is overhead. That night, the caravan camps in a depression between dunes. No one sits close to anyone else. The plague is gone, probably, but the paranoia remains. You eat your rations alone, checking yourself compulsively for symptoms that don't exist yet, might never exist, or might be germinating in your lungs right now waiting to bloom into buboes and death. The stars wheel overhead, the same stars that watch 3 people die, the same stars that will watch countless more die along this cursed trade route. You think about disease spreading silently through populations, about how every handshake contains potential murder, about the fragility of health in a world without medicine. You touch your throat, feeling the reassuring lack of swelling, still clean, still lucky, for now. The language problem hits you fully when the caravan reaches Turpan, a bustling oasis city where your limited Mandarin becomes completely useless. You've been struggling with communication for weeks, but the Silk Road's western sections operate in a bewildering babel that makes simple transactions feel like cryptography. At the Turpan market, you need to purchase new boots. Your original pair finally disintegrated beyond repair, held together only by hope and camel hair twine. You approach a cobbler's stall and attempt to communicate through gestures, pointing at your destroyed footwear, then at the boots on display, then at your feet. The cobbler responds in rapid-fire Sogdian. You stare blankly. He switches to Persian. Still nothing. He tries Turkic, then what might be Arabic, growing increasingly frustrated with each linguistic failure. Finally, he holds up 7 fingers. You think he means 7 coins, so you pull out 7 copper pieces from your dwindling purse. He shakes his head violently and holds up 7 fingers again, this time pointing at the sun. 7 days? 7 hours? 7 of some unit you don't understand. You're paralyzed by incomprehension, and the cobbler is now shouting in multiple languages, none of which penetrate your ignorance. The Kashgar woman rescues you, appearing from the crowd and negotiating in fluent Persian. Turns out the cobbler wanted 7 days to custom-make boots, and your offer of immediate copper payment confused him because he thought you were trying to rush order, which costs extra. The miscommunication nearly escalated into a genuine dispute that could have involved market authorities, potential punishment for fraud, or simply being banned from trading, a death sentence when you need supplies. The mainstream historical fact: the Silk Road operated as a polyglot nightmare. A single caravan might contain travellers speaking Mandarin, Cantonese, Sogdian, Persian, Arabic, Turkic languages, Tocharian, Sanskrit, Aramaic, and dozens of regional dialects. Major trading hubs like Turpan or Samarkand served as linguistic crossroads where professional translators made fortunes, and where a single misunderstood word could mean the difference between a profitable trade and a fatal insult. You return to camp humbled and bootless, having paid a deposit for custom work you'll collect in a week. Chen is unimpressed. "Learn numbers in Persian," he orders through a translator. "Learn water, food, danger, bandits, sick. 5 words might save your life. Everything else is luxury." That evening, the Kashgar woman offers to teach you survival Persian. Not conversational fluency, just the bare minimum to avoid death by miscommunication. You practice numbers, pointing at objects and learning their names, repeating phrases until your mouth adapts to sounds your native language never prepared you for. "Ab," she repeats for the 15th time. "Water." Not ab-bar, not ab, just ab. You're adding syllables that don't exist. You try again. Ab, better. Now nan, bread, and dozd, thieves. If you shout dozd in a market, people respond, might save you. The lesson continues for an hour, and by the end you've acquired perhaps 30 words of broken Persian. It feels simultaneously inadequate and overwhelming. 30 words to navigate a world with 70 languages. It's like trying to cross an ocean in a bathtub, a quirky detail that makes the language situation marginally more manageable. Silk Road traders developed an elaborate system of hand signals and gestural communication that transcended language barriers. Finger-counting methods, arm positions for negotiating prices, specific head movements for yes-no that varied by region. These became a sort of universal merchant code. But the system had regional variations, and using the wrong gesture could be offensive or confusing. Historians still argue whether this gestural lingua franca helped more than it hindered, or whether it just created new layers of potential misunderstanding. The next day brings a perfect demonstration of how language failures kill. A merchant from your caravan, one of the middle-tier traders you barely know, tries to purchase grain from a Uyghur farmer at Turpan's outskirts. The merchant speaks Mandarin and basic Mongolian. The farmer speaks Uyghur and broken Sogdian. Neither shares a language. Through gestures they negotiate what the merchant believes is a price. 5 copper coins for a large sack of millet. He pays, takes the sack and returns to camp. 2 hours later the farmer arrives with 6 angry relatives, all armed, all shouting in Uyghur. Chen has to intervene with translators, and the truth emerges. The merchant agreed to 5 coins as a deposit, with 5 more upon delivery of 3 additional sacks. By taking the 1 sack and leaving, he essentially stole from the farmer. The merchant protests, genuinely confused, not malicious. He thought the transaction was complete. But intent doesn't matter when 7 armed men think you're a thief. Chen pays the remaining 20 coins from caravan funds to settle the dispute, then beats the merchant thoroughly while the Uyghur family watches. Not punishment for theft, punishment for nearly getting everyone killed through linguistic incompetence. That night the beaten merchant nurses his injuries alone. No sympathy from the caravan. You almost died because he couldn't count to 5 in Uyghur. The mathematics of blame are straightforward. You intensify your language lessons, now painfully aware that communication failure isn't embarrassing. It's lethal. The Kashgar woman teaches you market phrases. How much? Too expensive. I'll return tomorrow. Basic sentences that reduce the chance of accidentally agreeing to sell your internal organs. But the real linguistic terror emerges in situations where precision matters absolutely. Medical terminology, for instance. You develop severe stomach pain, probably from the questionable water at the last oasis, and need to explain your symptoms to a local healer in Turpan. through multiple translators, Mandarin to Sogdian to Persian. You try to communicate. Sharp pain, lower right abdomen, worsening over 2 days. What the healer receives after 3 linguistic filters: general stomach discomfort, possibly gas, ongoing for weeks. He prescribes herbs for indigestion. You take them for 2 days while your actual condition, probably early appendicitis or severe bacterial infection, worsens. Only when you physically grab the healer and force his hand to the exact pain location does he understand. His eyes widen. Different herbs, different treatment, possible surgery if it continues. The translation failures nearly killed you through medical malpractice that wasn't really anyone's fault. Historians still argue whether the Silk Road's linguistic diversity was a feature or a bug. Did it protect local culture's knowledge? Probably. Did it also cause countless deaths through misunderstanding? Absolutely. You're living in the overlap, where every interaction is a gamble that your meaning survived translation. The week in Turpan becomes a crash course in communicative humility. You learn that tone matters as much as words. Aggressive Persian sounds different from polite Persian, even if you don't understand either. You learn that some gestures are universal, genuine smiles, bowing slightly, opening your hands to show non-aggression. You learn that when truly stuck, finding a child is often better than finding an adult. Children in trading cities often speak 3 or 4 languages from growing up in the markets, and they're less likely to be offended by your incompetence. Your custom boots arrive on day 7, and the cobbler speaks to you in extremely basic Mandarin learned from previous Chinese customers. Boots, good. You walk, happy. You understand perhaps 60% and respond with enthusiastic nodding and your copper coins. The transaction completes successfully, and you feel absurdly proud of this minor achievement. The Kashgar woman notices your satisfaction and smiles. Small victories. On the Silk Road, successfully buying boots without starting an international incident counts as a win. But she also warns, Turpan is easy. People here expect foreigners. Wait until we reach the mountain passes where tribes speak languages nobody else knows, where your translator might be the only person in 50 miles who speaks both your language and theirs. If that translator gets sick, dies, or decides to rob you, she trails off meaningfully. That night you practice your survival vocabulary: water, food, danger, help. Thank you. Sorry. Numbers 1 through 10 in 3 languages. It's pathetic. It's inadequate. It's all you have. Around the fire you listen to the caravan's multilingual murmur. Mandarin here, Persian there, someone singing in what might be Arabic or Aramaic. It's beautiful and frustrating in equal measure. All these people sharing space but divided by language barriers as effective as physical walls. You think about home, where everyone spoke your language, where misunderstandings were about meaning rather than basic comprehension. That world feels fictional now. The real world is this: a babel of tongues where every sentence is a negotiation, every word a potential landmine, and silence is often the safest choice. The Kashgar woman catches you brooding and offers final advice. Learn 1 phrase in every language. I don't understand. Please speak slowly. It won't solve everything, but it's honest. People respect honesty more than they respect bad language skills. You practice the phrase in Persian, then Sogdian, then Turkic. Your pronunciation is terrible, but at least it's terrible in 3 languages now. Progress, you suppose? Of a sort. The temperature swings hit you hardest during the stretch between Turpan and Kucha, where the desert seems to have a personal vendetta against the concept of moderation. You wake before dawn, shivering so violently that your teeth chatter loud enough to wake Spite, who groans her camel disapproval. The thermometer, if such a thing existed and you owned one, would read somewhere around 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Your breath makes clouds. The water in your bladder has a thin skin of ice. By noon, that same thermometer would show 115 degrees. The 40-degree swing happens in roughly 6 hours, and your medieval wool clothing is optimized for exactly neither extreme. At dawn, you pile on every layer you own and still freeze. By midday, you're stripped to a single layer and still cooking. Your body never adjusts because there's nothing to adjust to. Just violent oscillation between hypothermia and heat stroke. The mainstream historical fact. Central Asian deserts experience some of the most extreme temperature variations on Earth. The Taklamakan and surrounding regions regularly swing 40 to 60 degrees between night and day, and seasonal variations can exceed 100 degrees. Medieval travellers had no synthetic fabrics, no temperature-regulating technology, just wool, silk and leather that performed adequately in moderate conditions and failed spectacularly at extremes. Chen explains the strategy during a frigid morning departure. Layer at dawn, strip at noon, layer at dusk. Never stay in one configuration. Your body will betray you, tell you you're comfortable when you're actually dying. Ignore how you feel. Watch the sun. It's counterintuitive advice. At dawn, when you're shivering, the last thing you want is to think about midday heat. But Chen's right. If you don't prepare during the cold hours, you'll be caught wearing too much when the temperature spikes, and removing layers while walking wastes time and creates chaos in the caravan line. You watch the experienced merchants execute this thermal dance with practiced efficiency. They wear their clothing in calculated layers designed for quick removal. An outer robe that comes off easily, an inner tunic that provides core coverage, leg wraps that can be loosened without stopping. You're still figuring out the system, which means you're constantly too hot or too cold, never quite synchronized with the desert's mood swings. The first serious casualty from temperature extremes happens on day 3. One of the younger merchants, a man from Dunhuang making his first crossing, wakes up sluggish and confused during the pre-dawn cold. He insists he's fine, just tired. Chen examines him briefly and delivers the diagnosis. Hypothermia, early stages. The man's core temperature dropped during the night because he gave his second blanket to a friend, a gesture of generosity that is now potentially fatal. They wrap him in every available blanket and force him to drink warm tea made from precious fuel. He shivers violently for an hour, then gradually stabilizes. By noon, when the temperature hits its peak, he's recovered enough to walk, though he's embarrassed and noticeably weaker. That night, Chen redistributes blankets, ensuring everyone has minimum coverage. Generosity is admirable, but dead generous people don't complete crossings. A quirky detail that saves lives. Experienced Silk Road travellers learn to sleep in specific positions to maximize warmth. You curl into a tight ball, knees to chest, minimizing exposed surface area. You sleep with your head covered, even though it feels claustrophobic, because you lose massive heat through your scalp. Some merchants sleep in pairs, not romantically, just thermodynamically, sharing body heat through the coldest hours. The practice has strict protocols, always same gender, always agreed upon in advance, and absolutely no movement that could be misinterpreted. On the Silk Road, survival occasionally requires intimacy without any associated warmth. The heat casualties are slower but more insidious. You don't notice yourself overheating until you're already in trouble. The symptoms creep. First, excessive sweating. then the sweating stops, then confusion, then collapse. By the time you realize something's wrong, you're potentially minutes from organ failure. The Kashgar woman teaches you the signs to watch in yourself and others. If you stop sweating but still feel hot, you're in danger. If your thoughts feel fuzzy, like you're slightly drunk, you're in danger. If you stop caring whether you're in danger, you're definitely in danger. 3 days after Turpin, a middle-tier merchant collapses during the afternoon. He was walking normally, then he wasn't, just crumpled like someone cut his puppet strings. Chen orders an immediate halt which costs precious daylight hours. They strip the man down, pour water over him, precious water, cargo water, and force liquid down his throat. He's unconscious but breathing. His skin is dry as parchment and hot as stone left in sun. For an hour it's unclear whether he'll survive. His temperature is so elevated that brain damage becomes likely even if he lives. The caravan can't wait indefinitely. Stationary time is money evaporating. But leaving him is also problematic. He's middle tier, which means he has friends, connections, and cargo value that can't simply be redistributed. He wakes eventually, confused and weak. The recovery takes 3 hours, during which the entire caravan sits idle, burning daylight and patience. That evening, Chen announces a new policy. Mandatory water consumption checks. Everyone must drink minimum amounts at scheduled intervals, whether thirsty or not. Your body's thirst signals are unreliable in extreme heat. You'll die of dehydration while feeling only mildly thirsty. The policy is enforced through public humiliation. At each rest stop, Chen or his designated lieutenant watches everyone drink their ration. If you don't finish, he shouts your failure to the entire caravan. Zhang refuses water. Zhang wants to collapse and waste everyone's time. The shame is more effective than any punishment. You adapt slowly to the temperature swings, learning to ignore your body's immediate comfort signals and trust the schedule. Cold at dawn? Start removing layers anyway because noon is coming. Hot at midday? Start adding layers because dusk will freeze you. It's like living in permanent jet lag, where your internal temperature regulation never syncs with external reality. Historians still argue whether these extreme conditions actually built physical resilience or just killed everyone who couldn't adapt quickly enough. Probably both. You're certainly becoming more tolerant of discomfort, but you're also watching your body deteriorate in subtle ways. Persistent fatigue, inability to concentrate, a strange disconnection from physical sensations that might be adaptation or might be slow organ failure. The nights become your enemy in ways you didn't anticipate. The cold isn't just uncomfortable, it's metabolically expensive. Your body burns calories just maintaining core temperature, which means you're hungrier at dawn than at dusk, even though you ate your evening ration. The morning hunger is cellular, desperate, a body crying out for fuel to burn for warmth. But rations don't increase because you're cold. Chen's calculations account for average caloric needs, not thermal extremes. You're slowly running a deficit, losing weight you don't have to lose, burning muscle because there's no fat left. You notice your fingers getting bonier, your face more angular in its reflection in still water. Everyone's losing mass. The caravan is gradually consuming itself. One particularly brutal night, the temperature drops below freezing. You wake multiple times, too cold to sleep, and each time you're shocked that you're still alive. Your blanket is inadequate. Your clothing is inadequate. Everything is inadequate. You seriously consider pressing against Spite for warmth, but camels sleep erratically and she might kick you to death. At dawn, 2 people have frostbite, minor cases, just toe discoloration and numbness, but it's a warning. Chen announces we're taking the faster route ahead, even though it's more dangerous because the slow route risks more cold exposure. Speed now, safety later. The temperature swings are weaponizing the desert's geography against you. You're learning that the Silk Road's dangers aren't just dramatic. Bandits, plague, sandstorms. They're also the slow grind of temperature extremes, turning your body into an inefficient machine that's constantly wrong about its environment. You're either shivering or sweating, never comfortable, always fighting thermal battles your medieval equipment wasn't designed to win. That evening you layer every piece of clothing you own and still know it won't be enough. The sun sets, taking all warmth with it like a departing thief. Within minutes, the temperature plummets. You curl into your tight ball, head covered, already dreading the shivering that's coming. Beside you, the Kashgar woman does the same. 17 more nights like this before the mountains, she says quietly. Then it gets cold for real. You don't ask what she means, don't want to know. The current cold is already nearly killing you. The stars appear, beautiful and useless. They don't generate heat. They just watch you freeze, same as they watch thousands of merchants freeze before you, same as they'll watch thousands more. You close your eyes and try to sleep, knowing you'll wake 6 times before dawn, each time colder, each time wondering if this is the night your body finally gives up the thermal war. Tomorrow the sun will return and you'll roast, but tonight you freeze. The Silk Road offers variety if nothing else. The food poisoning starts on a Tuesday, or what you think is Tuesday, though days have blurred into a continuous stream of suffering without calendars or weekends to mark time. You ate the same evening meal as everyone else, millet porridge with chunks of preserved meat that tasted questionable, but wasn't notably worse than usual. Everything tastes questionable after 6 weeks on the Silk Road. Your palate has recalibrated to accept not actively rotting as the gold standard of cuisine. 3 hours after dinner, your stomach announces its rebellion. The cramps start as mild discomfort, then escalate to knife-twisting agony that doubles you over. You stumble away from camp, hoping for privacy, but there is no privacy on the Silk Road. Dysentery doesn't respect dignity. You spend the next hour in violent intestinal distress while the caravan sleeps nearby, and you understand why medieval travellers considered this one of the journey's worst humiliations. Not the sickness itself, but the public nature of your body's betrayal. By dawn, 7 others are showing symptoms. The meat, apparently. Someone examines the remainder and finds it greenish at the centre, which explains everything and nothing. The meat was supposedly preserved with salt, but preservation is more art than science out here, and someone's art failed catastrophically. The mainstream historical fact: foodborne illness killed more Silk Road travellers than bandits, possibly more than disease. Without refrigeration, proper preservation techniques, or understanding of bacterial contamination, every meal was a gamble. Meat preserved with insufficient salt grew botulism. Grain stored improperly developed toxic molds. Water contaminated with animal waste caused cholera, typhoid, and dysentery. You're eating and drinking from a medieval biohazard buffet, and your only protection is luck and a digestive system that's slowly building immunity through exposure, assuming the exposure doesn't kill you first. Chen is furious, not at anyone specifically, just at the universe for this setback. 8 people unable to walk properly means slower pace, which means more days in the desert, which means more resource consumption and more opportunities for other disasters. He doesn't offer sympathy. Instead, he announces reduced water rations for the sick. Logical. since you're losing fluids faster than you can replace them anyway, and wasting water on bodies that might not survive is poor resource management. The Kashgar woman, still healthy, brings you a clay cup with dark liquid. Charcoal tea, she explains. You chewed charcoal pieces earlier, remember? Same principle. Won't cure you, but might absorb some of the poison, might reduce how long you're useless. The tea tastes like drinking campfire ashes mixed with regret, but you consume it desperately. When your stomach is staging a violent coup, anything that promises relief becomes precious. The charcoal helps marginally, or perhaps it doesn't, and you're just experiencing placebo comfort. Either way, you'll take it. The next 3 days are a blur of misery. You walk because stopping means being left behind, but walking while your intestines are liquefying is its own special torment. The cramps come in waves, each one making you seriously consider just lying down and accepting death as the more dignified option. But you don't lie down. None of the 8 sick people do. You stagger forward, fueled by fear and stubbornness and the knowledge that death from food poisoning is slow and humiliating. A quirky detail that provides minimal comfort. Silk Road travellers developed elaborate theories about food safety that range from surprisingly accurate to completely insane. Some believed that silver spoons would tarnish if dipped in poisoned food, partially true for certain toxins. Others insisted that prayers spoken over meals made them safer. Probably useless, but psychological comfort has its own value. Some merchants hired professional food tasters, usually desperate people willing to risk their lives for a few extra coins. Historians still argue whether these tasters actually prevented many deaths or just provided false confidence while eating the same contaminated food. By day 4, you're improving. The cramps have downgraded from knife in gut to persistent angry fist. You can walk without stopping every 100 yards. You even manage to keep down solid food, just millet, no meat, no risk. 2 of the other sick merchants have recovered similarly, but 3 are getting worse, and 1, the young merchant who nearly died of hypothermia earlier, has developed a fever on top of the intestinal distress. Chen examines him with the detached concern of someone calculating losses. Infection. From the food poisoning, probably. Or maybe something else. He's weak from the hypothermia episode, which makes him vulnerable. The diagnosis is delivered to the group, not to the sick man, because the sick man's opinion is irrelevant. He's cargo now, not merchant. That night you hear him moaning from his spot near the fire. The sound is pitiful and constant, the sound of a body at war with itself. No one offers much comfort. Everyone's too exhausted, too focused on their own survival. The Kashgar woman brings him water and whispers something. Prayer or encouragement or simply acknowledgement that someone sees his suffering. He dies at dawn. Not dramatically. He just stops breathing between one moment and the next, transitioning from dying to dead without fanfare. His burial is efficient. Shallow grave, rocks on top, brief silence that might be respect or might just be everyone catching their breath. The caravan moves out within an hour. You're down to 36 people now. The attrition is becoming noticeable, troubling. Each loss means redistributed cargo, adjusted hierarchies, and the creeping awareness that your own survival is more luck than skill. That young merchant did everything right except have a strong immune system. The universe killed him with spoiled meat and bad timing. The food paranoia intensifies after his death. Everyone examines their rations obsessively, smelling for rot, checking for discoloration, sometimes refusing meals entirely if something seems off. Chen tries to maintain quality control, but he's buying provisions from sketchy sources because the reliable sources are expensive and dwindling funds force compromises. Every meal becomes a calculated risk. You develop your own testing ritual. Smell first, then tiny taste, then wait 10 minutes before eating more. It's not scientific, but it's something. The Kashgar woman notices and approves. Smart, cautious, that's how you survive. Not by being strong or brave, but by being paranoid in useful ways. The water situation compounds the food problems. Every source is potentially contaminated, and you can't boil water while travelling. No time, no fuel. So you drink questionable water to wash down questionable food, and your digestive system becomes a battleground where various pathogens wage war, while you walk across deserts trying to reach markets that might buy your increasingly damaged cargo. A week after the poisoning incident, someone discovers weevils in the grain supply. Tiny beetles have infiltrated the millet stores, laying eggs that hatched into larvae that are now eating your food supply from within. The sight is nauseating. White worms threading through grain like living rice. Chen orders the grain sifted, removing visible insects, but everyone knows larvae and eggs remain. You'll be eating beetle protein whether you want to or not. Extra nutrition, Zhang jokes grimly, picking a weevil from his porridge and flicking it away. Free meat with every meal. No one laughs, but no one stops eating either. Starvation is a more immediate threat than mild disgust. You learn to chew with your eyes closed, not thinking too hard about texture, just consuming calories because calories are survival. Historians still argue whether Silk Road travellers suffered more from contaminated food or insufficient food. The answer is probably both, in varying ratios depending on season, region, and luck. You're experiencing the contaminated phase, where every meal is Russian roulette with your digestive system. Later, if you survive this, you'll experience the insufficient phase where there's simply not enough food regardless of quality. That night, you eat your weevil-enhanced porridge and feel your stomach accept it without immediate rebellion. Small victories. Your body is adapting, building resilience, or maybe just giving up the fight. Either way, you're keeping food down. That's progress. The young merchant's grave is somewhere behind you now, unmarked except by rocks that will scatter in the next windstorm. He gambled on Silk Road trade and lost everything on spoiled meat and bad luck. You gambled too, and you're still here, which means you're winning. For now. You check your provisions. Dried fruit that's mostly sugar and mould. Grain infested with beetles. Water that smells like camel. And meat you don't trust. This is your menu for the foreseeable future. Bon appétit. The Kashgar woman catches you examining your supplies and offers her food philosophy. Eat enough to walk. Not more. Every extra bite is risk. Minimal calories, minimal exposure. Survive on less than you want, more than you need. It's not inspiring, but it's practical. You're learning that the Silk Road doesn't reward adventurous eating. It rewards cautious, paranoid, minimalist consumption. Eat to survive, not to enjoy. Flavor is a luxury. Dignity is a memory. You lie down on sand that's already cooling, your stomach gurgling but stable, and you're grateful for this low bar of success. You didn't die today. You kept food down. Tomorrow you'll do it again, assuming tomorrow's meal doesn't kill you. The night terrors start after you pass the ruins of an abandoned caravanserai. Its mud brick walls half collapsed, and its courtyard littered with what might be old campfires, or might be something worse. The local guide Chen hired in Kucha, a weathered Uyghur man named Bashir, refuses to camp near the ruins. When pressed for explanation, he speaks in rapid Uyghur that gets translated through 3 people before reaching you as bad spirits, angry dead. They call to travellers at night. You're skeptical because you're a rational person from a rational time. But rationality provides poor insulation against primal fear at 3 a.m. when you hear voices calling from the darkness beyond camp. The first time it happens, you jolt awake convinced someone's shouting your name. The voice is distant but distinct, and it sounds genuinely distressed, like someone lost and frightened. You sit up, scanning the darkness. The camp is silent except for snoring and the occasional camel grunt. No one else seems to have heard it. You lie back down, convincing yourself it was a dream, the wind, auditory hallucination from exhaustion. Then it comes again. Your name, definitely your name, from somewhere out in the dunes. Your whole body floods with adrenaline. The Kashgar woman's hand clamps on your wrist before you can stand. "Don't," she whispers. "Remember the singing sands. Same principle. The desert makes sounds that mimic human voices, wind through rocks, sand shifting, temperature differentials creating acoustic oddities. It's not real. It's never real. But it sounds real. Desperately, urgently real." You lie there rigid, listening to the voice call you 3 more times before falling silent. Sleep becomes impossible. You spend the rest of the night staring at stars and wondering what evolutionary malfunction makes human brains so vulnerable to phantom sounds in darkness. The mainstream historical fact. Silk Road travellers reported supernatural phenomena with remarkable consistency across cultures and centuries. Phantom voices, ghost caravans, spectral lights, and overwhelming feelings of dread in specific locations appear in Chinese, Persian, and European accounts. Modern explanations range from infrasound, low-frequency vibrations that trigger anxiety, to sleep deprivation hallucinations, to perfectly rational fear responses, to genuinely dangerous environments being interpreted through supernatural frameworks. But explaining the phenomenon doesn't make it less terrifying when you're experiencing it. Bashir explains the local mythology during the next day's march. Through translation chains that turn his poetry into choppy prose, you learn that this stretch of desert is considered particularly haunted. A caravan of 200 people disappeared here 70 years ago, just vanished without trace. No bodies, no cargo, no sign of battle or natural disaster. Later travellers reported hearing the lost caravan at night, voices calling for help, camels braying, the sounds of a camp that isn't there. Jinn took them, Bashir concludes, opened a door to the spirit world and pulled them through. Now they're trapped between worlds trying to call others to join them. You hear them calling, you ignore, you answer, you join them. Simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying folk wisdom that might be protecting you from actual danger, or might be inducing psychological vulnerability that makes you more likely to panic and make fatal mistakes. You can't tell which, and that uncertainty is its own form of torture. That night the phenomena intensify. Multiple merchants report hearing voices, seeing lights in the distance, feeling presences near the camp perimeter. One of the middle-tier traders swears he saw his dead wife standing at the edge of firelight, beckoning. He actually stood up and started walking toward the apparition before 2 others tackled him. Chen orders double watches and institutes a buddy system. No one sleeps alone. Everyone is within arm's reach of a partner who can physically restrain them if they try to wander. It's humiliating and necessary. The desert is weaponizing your psychology, and the only defense is acknowledging you're vulnerable and implementing physical safeguards. A quirky detail that somehow makes this worse. Different cultures along the Silk Road had different supernatural explanations for the same phenomena, but they all agreed on the core danger. Don't investigate mysterious sounds or lights at night. Chinese merchants blamed fox spirits. Persian traders blamed jinn. Buddhist pilgrims blamed demons testing their faith. The supernatural frameworks varied, but the survival advice remained consistent. Stay in camp, trust nothing beyond the firelight, wait for dawn. You experience your worst episode on the third night in the haunted region. You dream your home, vividly, impossibly detailed. You can smell your mother's cooking, feel familiar furniture, hear neighborhood sounds you'd forgotten you missed. The relief is overwhelming. The journey was just a nightmare. You're safe. You're home. Then a voice in the dream says, "Come outside. Come see." And dream you walks outside and finds the desert. Your home is gone, replaced by dunes and darkness, and the voice laughs. Not human laughter, something that uses laughter as a weapon. You wake up gasping, and for several seconds you can't remember where you are. The cognitive disorientation is profound. You're lying on sand under stars, wearing medieval clothing, sleeping next to a man you barely know who's supposed to keep you from sleepwalking to your death. The wrongness of your situation crashes over you in waves. The Kashgar woman is awake, watching. "Bad one?" she asks quietly. You nod, not trusting your voice. They get everyone eventually. The dreams that feel realer than waking. I think... She pauses, considering. I think our minds aren't built for this much sustained stress. We need safety, routine, familiar surroundings. Out here, with everything threatening and nothing familiar, our brains start generating false safety. Dreams of home, visions of rescue, anything to relieve the pressure. It's a surprisingly psychological explanation for someone who's never heard of modern neuroscience. But she's right. Your brain is cracking under sustained fear, manufacturing comfort that makes the real world harder to bear. Historians still argue whether Silk Road supernatural beliefs were purely psychological coping mechanisms or whether they reflected genuine phenomena that modern science can't fully explain. Did travellers experience shared hallucinations, mass hysteria? Or were there actual environmental factors, toxins, infrasound, electromagnetic anomalies, that created measurable effects interpreted through supernatural frameworks? You don't know and can't know. What you know is that you're terrified to sleep because your dreams betray you, and you're terrified to stay awake because the darkness whispers lies that sound like truth. The desert has found your psychological weak points and is exploiting them with cruel efficiency. The fourth night brings the worst incident. A young merchant, one of the newcomers who survived the food poisoning, simply stands up around midnight and starts walking into the desert. His buddy is asleep, missing his responsibility. You see the movement, shout an alarm, and chaos erupts. Chen and 3 others chase him down about 50 yards out. He's walking steadily, eyes open but vacant, muttering in Mandarin about following the lights to water. There are no lights except stars. He's hallucinating or sleepwalking or experiencing some breakdown between dreaming and waking that sent him walking toward death with absolute confidence. They drag him back to camp. He fights them, screaming that they're preventing him from reaching the water, that his family is waiting, that he can see them. It takes 4 people to restrain him until he collapses, exhausted. By morning he's recovered enough to be horrified by his own actions, but the trust is broken. How do you sleep knowing your own brain might betray you? Chen implements even stricter protocols. People sleep physically tied to stakes driven into the ground. It's degrading and uncomfortable, but it works. You can't sleepwalk if you're tethered. The rope around your ankle is a humiliation and a lifeline. The 5th night passes without major incident, though the voices continue. You hear them calling, names, pleas for help, promises of water and safety. You ignore them all, lying in your rope tether like a dog on a chain, and you understand that surviving the Silk Road requires surrendering not just comfort, but autonomy. Your brain is an unreliable narrator. Your instincts are compromised. Only the physical constraints, ropes, buddies, rigid protocols, keep you from following phantom voices into permanent darkness. By the 6th morning, Bashir announces you're leaving the haunted zone. The psychological relief is immediate and profound. You don't have to be told you're safe. You can feel the oppressive dread lifting like morning fog. Whether it was supernatural forces or environmental psychology or mass hysteria, it's behind you now. That night, you sleep without voices calling, without dreams of home that transform into nightmares, without the sensation that something is waiting just beyond firelight, patient and hungry. You sleep badly because everything hurts, and the ground is hard and you're still tethered to a stake. But it's normal bad sleep, not supernatural terror sleep. Progress of a sort. The Kashgar woman notices your relief and smiles. You survive the spirits, most do, but some don't, and they're out there now, calling to the next caravan, adding their voices to the chorus. Remember that. The dead of the Silk Road aren't peacefully buried. They're active participants, recruiting others to join them. You don't know if you believe that, but you know you'll never forget those voices calling your name in the darkness, promising things they couldn't deliver, trying to lure you to death dressed as salvation. The Silk Road's psychological warfare is as deadly as its physical dangers, and unlike bandits or disease, you carry the psychological scars inward, invisible, permanent. You check your ankle tether before sleeping, still secure, still keeping you from yourself. Good enough. The slave market appears without warning in a town called Yarkand, squeezed between legitimate merchants selling spices and a cobbler's stall that smells like tanned leather and despair. You notice it only because the Kashgar woman deliberately steers you away, her hand firm on your elbow, her face carefully neutral. But you've already seen enough. The iron collars, the chains connecting 6 or 7 people in a shuffling line, the utterly defeated postures of humans who've been reduced to inventory. Don't stare, she whispers urgently. Don't show interest. Don't make eye contact with the traders or the merchandise. In some places, looking too long is interpreted as shopping, and if you can't afford what you're examining, that's an insult worth violence. You avert your eyes, but the image burns itself into memory. The slave merchants aren't obviously villainous. They're dressed like regular traders, haggling over prices with the same bored competence as the spice seller next door. One is eating flatbread while pointing at a woman in chains, discussing her like she's a particularly nice carpet. The casualness is more disturbing than overt cruelty would be. The mainstream historical fact: slavery was endemic along the Silk Road, woven into the economic fabric as naturally as silk or tea. Captured enemies, debtors who couldn't pay, criminals serving sentences, and kidnapped travellers all flowed through slave markets in Samarkand, Bukhara, Kashgar, and dozens of smaller trading posts. Conservative estimates suggest tens of thousands of people were traded annually at the Silk Road's peak. Some were household servants, some labourers, some concubines. All were merchandise, their humanity legally erased by bills of sale. Back at camp, you work up the courage to ask Chen about what you saw. He's counting cargo, obsessively, constantly, and doesn't look up when he responds. Slavery exists, has always existed, will always exist. Your opinions on it are irrelevant. What matters is this: if you get separated from the caravan, if you can't pay tribute, if you're captured by certain bandit groups, you become that. Understand? You understand. This isn't a history lesson or moral philosophy debate. It's a threat assessment. The chains you saw aren't artifacts from a barbaric past. They're current technology and your potential merchandise. The Kashgar woman expands on Chen's warning that evening. 3 types of people become slaves on the Silk Road. First, the unlucky. Wrong place, wrong time, captured by raiders who see opportunity. Second, the indebted. Borrow money you can't repay, your creditor can legally sell you to recover losses. Third, the abandoned. Caravan masters cut loose people who become liabilities, sick, injured, rule breakers. Those people don't die in the desert. They get collected by scavengers who bring them to markets. She lets that information settle before continuing. You're currently Category 3 material. You're a newcomer with minimal value, maximum liability. If Chen decides you're not worth keeping, he'll leave you at some oasis with a half-bladder of water and vague directions. Within hours, slavers will find you. They patrol oases specifically looking for abandoned travelers. The calculation is grimly efficient. Why kill someone when you can profit from their desperation? The Silk Road has evolved mechanisms to monetize every form of human vulnerability. A quirky detail that makes this worse. Some slave merchants specialized in Silk Road capture. They'd track caravans, identify weak members, then create situations that would cause those members to be abandoned or separated. Start rumors about someone stealing. Contaminate their food so they become sick and burdensome. Create debt through rigged gambling. Once the person was cut loose, the slavers would swoop in, offering rescue that came with indentured servitude contracts that were effectively lifetime slavery. Historians still argue whether these specialized predators significantly impacted caravan demographics or were just occasional opportunists. 2 days after Yarkand, you witness the process firsthand. One of the middle-tier merchants, a man named Li, who's been increasingly erratic, has a complete breakdown. He starts screaming about spirits chasing him, about poison in the food, about Chen plotting to kill everyone. It's obviously psychological collapse from sustained stress, but the caravan can't accommodate madness. Chen tries reasoning with him. When that fails, he tries restraint. When Li breaks free and attacks someone with a knife, not effectively but with intent, the decision becomes inevitable. They disarm him, tie him up, and at the next settlement Chen leaves him with local authorities, paying a small fee for temporary custody until relatives can be contacted. Everyone knows there are no relatives coming. Everyone knows what happens next. You see it happen. Within an hour of the caravan's departure, 2 men approach the settlement. They're not wearing identifying clothing, but their purpose is obvious. They're speaking with the local authorities. Money is changing hands, and Li, still tied, still ranting, is being transferred from official custody to private ownership. The transaction takes maybe 10 minutes. Li is now merchandise. His breakdown, caused by Silk Road stress, has fed him into the system that will extract whatever labour value remains before discarding him. The efficiency is horrifying. That night, no one discusses Li. He's been erased from collective memory as completely as if he'd never existed. You want to object, to insist this is wrong, to demand someone acknowledge the injustice. But you're learning that the Silk Road doesn't traffic in justice. It traffics in survival mathematics, and Li stopped being a survivor the moment his mind broke. The Kashgar woman catches you brooding. Feeling guilty? She asks. It's not unkind, just observational. Shouldn't we? He was one of us. We just left him. He was attacking people with a knife. What's the alternative? Bring him along, let him hurt someone else, kill him ourselves? Chen chose the option that removes the threat without blood on our hands. The slave system did the rest. We didn't create it. We just exist inside it. It's rationalization, but it's also true. You didn't invent Silk Road slavery. You're just learning to navigate a world where it exists as infrastructure, as inevitable as bad water or bandit taxes. Over the next week, you see the system's full scope. In Kashgar proper, a major trading hub, the slave market is enormous. Hundreds of people in various states of sale, fresh captures who still have fight in their eyes, long-term slaves who've been broken and rebuilt as obedient tools, specialty merchandise marketed for specific skills or attributes. You see a man who speaks 12 languages being sold as a translator slave. You see skilled craftsmen whose debts exceeded their earnings. You see children, maybe 10 years old, being examined by potential buyers like puppies at a market. The children are the worst. Their eyes haven't learned deadness yet. They still hope for rescue that will never come. Bashir the guide notices your distress and offers context. The slaves in markets, already lost. Your pity changes nothing. The ones to worry about are the ones not captured yet. Stay valuable. Stay functional. Stay attached to your caravan. That's how you avoid the chains. It's practical advice delivered without emotion. On the Silk Road, empathy is a luxury that costs more than most can afford. You can feel bad about slavery, but feeling bad won't free anyone or protect you. Historians still argue whether Silk Road slavery was worse than contemporary slavery elsewhere. The answer probably depends on who was asking and what alternatives existed. For the people in chains, the academic debate is meaningless. They're still in chains. You leave Kashgar with renewed paranoia about your position in the caravan hierarchy. Every task Chen assigns, you complete obsessively. Every opportunity to demonstrate value, you seize. The invisible chains of potential slavery are more motivating than any whip. That night, you dream about iron collars and auction blocks. You wake up checking your neck, feeling phantom weight that isn't there yet, might never be there, or might be inevitable depending on luck and choices you haven't made yet. The Kashgar woman is awake, as usual. Nightmares about slavery, she guesses. You nod. Good. Fear keeps you careful. Careful keeps you free. Never forget that freedom on the Silk Road is a temporary condition based on utility and fortune. Lose either, and your merchandise. You lie back down, but sleep won't return. You think about Lee, ranting in chains somewhere, being broken and rebuilt into something useful to his owner. You think about the children in the market, their hope not yet extinguished. You think about the casual efficiency of the system, how it turns human catastrophe into profit. The Silk Road takes everything eventually. Your comfort, your health, your certainty, and sometimes your fundamental humanity. The lucky ones just lose cargo value and profits. The unlucky ones lose their names and become line items in someone's ledger. You check your position in the caravan hierarchy compulsively now, calculating your value, ensuring you remain slightly more useful alive and free than enslaved or dead. It's grim mathematics, but it's the only mathematics that matters out here. Stay valuable, stay attached, stay free. For now. The mountains announce themselves gradually, which somehow makes them more ominous than if they'd appeared suddenly. For 3 days you've watched the Karakoram Range grow on the horizon, white peaks that looked decorative and distant like painted scenery. Then one morning you wake up and they're not distant anymore. They're immediate, towering, and absolutely indifferent to whether you survive crossing them. Chen calls a halt for what he terms altitude preparation. which sounds official until you realize it just means sitting at the mountain's base for 2 days, letting your body adjust to thinner air while he negotiates with local guides who know the passes. The guides are wacky people, mountain-adapted humans who seem to breathe comfortably at elevations that leave you gasping from minimal effort. Your first introduction to altitude sickness comes from simply walking around camp. You take 20 steps and your lungs scream for air that isn't there. Your heart hammers like you've been sprinting. A mild headache blooms behind your eyes and refuses to leave. This is at base camp, still below 10,000 feet. The passes you'll be crossing exceed 15,000. The mainstream historical fact: the Karakoram mountain range contains some of the most brutal high-altitude terrain on Earth. The pass is used by Silk Road caravans, notably the Kunjarab and the various routes around K2, regularly killed travellers through altitude sickness, hypothermia, avalanches and simple falls from narrow paths. Modern mountaineers with specialised equipment, training and support consider these routes dangerous. Medieval merchants with pack animals and wool clothing considered them suicidal necessity. The Vaki guides explain through translators what you're facing. The main pass will take 4 days to cross. Temperatures will drop to well below freezing even in summer. The air contains roughly half the oxygen you're accustomed to. Altitude sickness will affect everyone. The question is severity. Mild cases: headaches, nausea, fatigue. Severe cases: brain swelling, lung fluid accumulation, death within hours. Cannot predict who gets sick, the lead guide explains in broken Persian. Strong young men die. Old women survive. The mountain chooses. You obey mountain. Maybe mountain lets you live. It's not encouraging, but it's honest. You're about to gamble your life on whether the mountain feels merciful, and the mountain's track record suggests mercy isn't its dominant characteristic. The preparation involves reducing cargo weight. Anything non-essential gets cached at the base to be collected on return trips, if there are return trips. Your ceramic pots, which you've hauled for 6 weeks, get left behind. They're too heavy, too fragile and worthless compared to your life. You feel oddly emotional about abandoning them, which tells you how psychologically fragile you've become. You're forming attachments to cargo to avoid thinking about larger losses. The guides also distribute small bags of coca leaves, not the refined cocaine that will be developed centuries later, just the raw leaves that high-altitude cultures have chewed for millennia. Chew slowly, the guide instructs. Helps with thin air, helps with cold, helps with wanting to die. Not magic, but helps. You chew the leaves experimentally. They're bitter and slightly numbing, but within 20 minutes your headache eases and breathing becomes marginally less desperate. It's not comfort, but it's improvement. And on the Silk Road, improvement is the highest aspiration. The ascent begins at dawn. The first day isn't terrible, steep but manageable. The air's still breathable enough that exertion doesn't immediately trigger collapse. But the cold is shocking. You're wearing every layer you own and it's insufficient. The wind cuts through wool like it's decorative rather than functional. Spite hates the mountains. She slips frequently on the rocky path, nearly falling twice before noon. Other camels are equally miserable, and you realize these animals evolved for deserts, not alpine environments. They're as out of place as you are, just more philosophically resigned to their misery. A quirky detail that provides minimal comfort. High-altitude Silk Road routes developed their own infrastructure of stone shelters built into cliff faces. These weren't comfortable, just windbreaks really, barely enclosed spaces where travellers could huddle and pretend the mountain wasn't actively trying to freeze them to death. Some shelters contained the remains of previous travellers who hadn't made it. Skeletons picked clean by scavengers, still clutching cargo they'd died protecting. Historians still argue whether these remains were left deliberately as warnings, or simply because burial at 15,000 feet is impractically difficult. By the second day, the altitude sickness hits hard. Your headache has evolved from annoying to debilitating. Nausea comes in waves. Every breath feels inadequate, like trying to survive on half portions of air. You're dizzy, weak, and struggling to think clearly. The coca leaves help, but they're pain management, not cure. 3 people develop severe symptoms. One middle-tier merchant starts coughing fluid. His lungs are filling with edema, drowning from the inside. The wacky guides examine him, confer briefly, and deliver the verdict. He goes down, or he dies. Maybe both. Chen makes the call. 2 guides will escort the sick man back down to base camp. If he survives the descent, he can recover and wait for the return journey. If not, well, one more body for the mountain's collection. The man is barely conscious during this discussion, which is probably merciful. You watch them descend, 3 figures growing smaller against the vast grey mountainside, and you understand you've crossed another threshold. Until now, the Silk Road's dangers felt survivable with luck and caution. But the mountains don't care about luck. They impose absolute requirements. Your body either functions at altitude or it doesn't. No amount of planning or skill changes the basic physiology. The 3rd day brings the worst conditions. You're above 14,000 feet. The air is knifing cold, and a storm rolls in with the casual malice that characterizes mountain weather. Visibility drops to maybe 20 feet. The wind is strong enough to stagger you. Snow begins falling. Not the gentle decorative snow of greeting cards, but sharp, wind-driven ice crystals that sting exposed skin. The guides order everyone to rope together. You're physically tied to the Kashgar woman in front and Zhang behind, creating a human chain that's supposed to prevent anyone from getting lost or blown off the path. It's terrifying and necessary. The path has narrowed to maybe 4 feet wide, with a cliff face on one side and a drop on the other that disappears into white nothing. Spite refuses to move. She's planted her feet, and no amount of pulling, pushing, or pleading will budge her. You're stuck, blocking the entire caravan while the storm intensifies. One of the Waki guides comes back, examines Spite, and pulls out a knife. You think he's going to kill her, but instead he cuts her free from the cargo chain and physically shoves her off the path. She disappears over the edge with a final outraged bellow. You're too shocked to react. The guide points at you and shouts something in Waki. A translator yells, "Move or join camel! Mountain doesn't wait!" You move. You've just watched your companion of 6 weeks get shoved off a cliff, and you move because stopping means following her. The emotional processing will have to wait for survival. The 4th day is the pass itself, the highest point, the most dangerous section, the place where the mountain makes its final decision about whether you're worthy. Your thoughts are sluggish, dreamlike. You're hypoxic and hypothermic, functioning on autopilot and coca leaves. The landscape is alien, nothing but rock, ice, and clouds below you. You're above weather. You're in a zone where humans don't belong. 2 more camels are lost to falls. 1 merchant collapses and can't be revived, dead from altitude, cold, exhaustion, or some combination. His body gets left in one of the stone shelters. No burial, no ceremony, just placement in a stone coffin where he'll freeze dry over years into a warning for future travellers. You cross the pass in a daze. The descent is supposed to be easier. but you're so exhausted that easier still means nightmare. Your legs are barely functional, your lungs burn, your fingers and toes are numb, maybe frostbite, maybe just cold. You can't tell and can't spare the attention to check. It takes 2 full days of descent before the air thickens enough that breathing stops feeling like drowning. Another day before you reach elevations where your headache finally recedes. By then, you've lost track of how many people the mountain claimed. At least 3 confirmed dead, 2 sent back down, uncertain number of missing who might have fallen or wandered off or simply given up. The caravan that emerges from the Karakoram is smaller, quieter and fundamentally changed. You're all survivors of something that tried very hard to kill you. The bonds formed aren't friendship exactly. Too much shared trauma for simple friendship. But you're connected now by mutual understanding that you've passed through death's territory and emerged alive. That night, camping in a valley where air feels thick as soup after the alpine deprivation, you finally process Spite's death. She was mean, aggressive, and difficult. She was also your responsibility, your companion, your tether to usefulness. You mourn her in silence, and the Kashgar woman doesn't comment. She lost her camel too. Everyone lost something in the mountains. The Waki guides depart at dawn, paid and satisfied. Their job was getting you across, not keeping you alive. The distinction matters in their contracts. Chen counts survivors, redistributes cargo, and announces the next destination. No memorial for the dead, no processing time. The Silk Road doesn't pause for grief. You check your fingers and toes, all present, though several are worryingly dark. Might be frostbite. Might lose them eventually. But you're alive, down from the mountains, breathing air that doesn't feel like punishment. The Karakoram is behind you. Ahead lies more desert, more bandits, more disease, more catastrophe. But the mountains are behind you. You survived the Silk Road's worst physical challenge. Everything else is just degrees of awful. You're 2 months into the journey when you finally understand the political situation you've been walking through, like a blind man in a minefield. The revelation comes in Samarkand, where Chen meets with a contact who delivers news that drains colour from his face, which is alarming because Chen never shows emotion beyond mild irritation. The translator relays the information in fragments. War. Mongol succession dispute. 3 princes claiming the throne. Territory between here and Merv is contested. Armies moving. Caravans are targets for supplies, conscription, or just because soldiers are bored and violent. Chen's response is delivered in Mandarin so rapid and profane that the translator struggles to keep up. The essence: you're caught between 3 military forces, any of which might rob you, press you into service, or simply kill you for being in the wrong place. The safe route you've been following just became a battlefield, and there's no reliable information about which armies control which territories because control is shifting daily. The mainstream historical fact: the Silk Road existed in a perpetual state of political instability. Empires rose and collapsed. Dynasties warred over trade routes. Regional warlords declared independence, then got conquered. Borders were fluid suggestions rather than fixed realities. A route that was safe last month might be a war zone today. Travellers caught between competing powers faced impossible choices: stay and wait for stability that might never come, or proceed and risk walking into active combat. Chen spends 3 days gathering intelligence, bribing informants, and consulting with other caravan masters who've attempted various routes. The reports are contradictory and universally bad. Western route. Mongol army camped at the main oasis, demanding tribute that amounts to total cargo confiscation. Northern route, recently raided by forces loyal to Prince Kublai, now occupied by bandits taking advantage of the power vacuum. Southern route, supposedly clear, but that information is 3 weeks old and therefore worthless. "We're going south," Chen finally announces, "fast as possible. If we encounter military forces, we cooperate completely. Give them whatever they want. Your cargo, your weapons, your dignity. Irrelevant compared to your life. Understand?" Everyone understands. You're about to cross territory where the normal rules of Silk Road commerce, brutal but predictable, are suspended in favour of military chaos where death is arbitrary and cheap. The first 2 days proceed normally, which makes everyone nervous. Normal is suspicious. Normal means you haven't encountered the problem yet. You travel faster than usual, pushing through rest periods, because speed is survival. Every hour stationary is an hour some army might arrive. On day 3 you see smoke on the horizon. Not campfire smoke. Too much. Too black. Something large is burning. Chen orders a halt while scouts investigate. They return an hour later with grim news. The next town was sacked 2 days ago. Buildings burned, population scattered or dead, supplies looted. No water available, no safety. You detour around the ruins, and even from a distance the devastation is obvious. The town isn't just damaged, it's erased. This is what military action looks like when armies aren't even pretending to discriminate between combatants and civilians. Everyone in the path gets processed as resources to be extracted or obstacles to be eliminated. A quirky detail that somehow makes this worse. Competing Mongol princes often employed the same military tactics because they'd learned from the same teachers. This meant you couldn't identify which army had destroyed a settlement based on the destruction pattern. Every prince's forces were equally efficient at burning, looting and killing. The only difference was which prince's banner flew over the ruins afterward, and even that changed frequently as territory shifted hands. Historians still argue whether this uniformity of military approach made Silk Road travel more or less dangerous, as there was no better army to hope you'd encounter. On day 5 you encounter actual soldiers. They're flying colours you don't recognise, red and gold banners with script you can't read. They number maybe 60, well armed, and blocking the road with professional competence that suggests this is routine rather than opportunistic. Their commander approaches Chen and speaks in Mongolian. Chen responds in the same language. You didn't know he spoke Mongolian, but of course he does. Successful Silk Road merchants speak every language that might keep them alive. The conversation is brief. The commander gestures at the caravan, clearly indicating he wants to inspect cargo. The inspection is thorough and professional. They inventory everything, taking notes in military records. This isn't robbery, it's requisition. They're documenting what they take for some bureaucratic purpose that will never result in compensation, but maintains the fiction that this is legitimate rather than theft. They take 30% of cargo, not the best silk. They don't know enough to identify quality, but they take quantity. Bolts of fabric, sacks of tea, random items that caught someone's eye. They also take 2 camels, 3 people's weapons, and all the remaining coca leaves. But they don't kill anyone. They don't rape, torture or conscript. They take material goods and leave, professional and efficient. Chen actually looks relieved, which tells you how much worse it could have been. Prince Arik's forces, he explains afterward, well disciplined. Could have taken everything and killed us for sport. 30% is practically generous in current circumstances. You've been travelling for 2 months. survived disease and mountains and bandits, and you just lost a third of your cargo to generous military theft. The mathematics of Silk Road economics are becoming painfully clear. Profit margins need to account for losses exceeding 50%. Anything less, and you're operating at a loss before you've even reached markets. The next encounter is worse, precisely because it's less professional. You're camped at an oasis 3 days later when a raiding party appears. Maybe 20 men, no uniforms, no banners, just opportunistic violence wearing military chaos as camouflage. They're not soldiers collecting supplies. They're bandits who figured out that current conditions allow them to operate without consequences. They demand everything. Chen tries negotiating, offering tribute similar to what the actual military took. Their leader, a scarred man missing most of his teeth, responds by shooting an arrow past Chen's head. Everything or everyone dies. Choose now. There is no choice. You empty the caravan. They take silk, tea, remaining camels, personal belongings, weapons, food, water containers, everything. They leave you with the clothes you're wearing and directions to the nearest settlement that might not kill you on sight. It's 40 miles away across desert. You have no water, no food, and no options. The Kashgar woman looks at you after the raiders leave. This is where most caravans end, not dramatically, just this, stripped and abandoned. The lucky ones reach the next town. The unlucky ones become skeletons that future travellers will see and ignore. Chen is already planning. We walk through the night. Cooler temperatures, less water loss. We reach the settlement or we die trying. Those are the options. You walk. It's the worst march of the entire journey because you're doing it depleted, dehydrated, and defeated. The mathematics are brutal. 40 miles, maybe 12 hours of walking at exhausted pace, burning calories you don't have, sweating water you can't replace. Some people will die. Question is how many? By dawn, 2 people have collapsed and can't continue. Chen makes the decision without hesitation. They stay. We continue. Anyone who stops walking is making their choice. It's murder by efficiency. But stopping to help means everyone dies instead of just 2. The mathematics are clear, even if the morality isn't. You reach the settlement 31 hours after being robbed. 16 people arrive out of the 22 who started walking. The missing 6 are either dead in the desert or taken by opportunistic slavers. You're too exhausted to care which. The settlement is suspicious of refugees from war zones. You could be soldiers, bandits, spies, or just desperate people willing to steal. Chen negotiates entry using his last remaining valuables, personal jewelry he'd hidden. The price is steep but necessary. You need water, food, and time to figure out what happens next. That night, Chen announces the new plan. We've lost too much. Continuing west is financial suicide. We return east, purchase new cargo with what credit I can secure, and attempt the return journey before winter. You've spent 2 months walking west. Now you'll reverse direction, retracing paths through all the same dangers, except this time with no cargo to trade for safety. You're returning home poorer, broken, and lucky to be alive. Historians still argue whether Silk Road trade was ultimately profitable given the loss rates. Some merchants made fortunes, most broke even, many died in debt. You're learning firsthand that every silk bolt that reaches markets carries the weight of uncounted disasters, failed caravans, and bodies left in deserts and mountains. The Kashgar woman sees your despair and offers perspective. You survived. Most don't. The cargo is replaceable. Your life isn't. Chen will secure new goods, organize a return caravan, and you'll go home having learned what the Silk Road actually costs. Some people pay tuition in money. You paid in suffering, but you're still here to use the education. It's cold comfort, but it's accurate. You survived political chaos most people never even hear about. You navigated shifting war zones, military requisitions, and bandit raids. You're still breathing when mathematics suggested you shouldn't be. That's victory of a sort. The kind the Silk Road specializes in. Victories that feel like defeats, survival that feels like failure, success measured not in profit but in pulse. You're going home, eventually, if you survive the return journey, which is far from guaranteed. The economics finally make sense to you 3 weeks into the return journey, when Chen sits down with his ledger and explains exactly how catastrophic this trip has been financially. You're camped at a relatively safe oasis, and he's calculating losses with the grim precision of someone performing an autopsy on their own business. Initial investment, 8,000 silver taels, he begins, his finger tracing columns of numbers you can barely read in the firelight. Cargo, supplies, wages, bribes, tribute. I borrowed 6,000, invested 2,000 personal savings, expected return, 20,000 if markets were favourable, 15,000 minimum. You do the mental math, even at minimum expectations, that's substantial profit margin. This is why people risk the Silk Road despite everything. Actual return, 0. Chen says it without emotion, but you see his jaw tighten. Lost 70% to military requisition, bandit raid, and abandoned cargo. Remaining 30% sold at eastern markets barely covered return journey expenses. I'm 8,000 in debt with no cargo, no profit, and creditors who will want payment regardless of circumstances. The mainstream historical fact. Silk Road economics operated on razor-thin margins masked by occasional spectacular successes. For every merchant who made a fortune, dozens broke even or went bankrupt. The entire system functioned on credit, debt, and the gamble that this journey would be the profitable one. Interest rates on trading loans often exceeded 50% annually because lenders understood the risks. Default was common enough that specialized debt collectors became their own industry, tracking down failed merchants and seizing whatever assets remained, or selling the merchant himself into slavery to recover losses. You ask the question everyone's wondering. What happens now? I sell everything I own. My house, my father's business connections, personal items, maybe covers half the debt. The rest, he shrugs. I work it off. Take employment with another caravan master, spend 5 years earning wages that go directly to creditors, or I flee to a region where my creditors have no power, start over with nothing, or I end up in chains at a slave market. These are the options. The Kashgar woman adds her own story as counterpoint. I've made this journey 6 times. 3 profitable, 2 break-even, 1 catastrophic loss. The 3 profitable runs barely cover the losses from the bad one. But I keep going because alternatives are worse. Return home a debt slave. Work in factories for copper coins. At least on the Silk Road there's a chance. Small chance, but chance. It crystallizes for you. The Silk Road isn't a get-rich scheme. It's a gamble where the house wins more often than not, but the occasional big payout keeps desperate people rolling dice. You're surrounded by gamblers who understand the odds are against them but see no better options. Zhang contributes his perspective. My father made 3 successful crossings, bought a house, married well, retired comfortable. I've made 2 crossings, this one and one previous. Lost money both times, but I saw my father's success, so I think, next time, always next time. Maybe I'm chasing ghosts, but what else is there? A quirky detail that reveals the system's true brutality. Successful Silk Road merchants almost never detailed their losses publicly, only their triumphs. This created survivorship bias where everyone heard about the fortunes made, but not the ruined lives hidden behind successful facades. A merchant might boast about one profitable journey while concealing 3 failed ones that left him perpetually in debt. Historians still argue whether this selective reporting made the Silk Road seem more profitable than it actually was, or whether people understood the truth but participated anyway out of desperation. Chen continues explaining the broader economics. The silk you carried. I purchased it for 3 silver per bolt in Xi'an. In Samarkand markets it sells for 15 silver. If markets are good, if silk isn't flooding from other caravans, if political conditions allow sale. That 5-fold markup sounds amazing until you factor in losses. He ticks items off on his fingers. Tribute to bandit chiefs 10%. Oasis taxes 5%. Guide fees 8%. Supply costs 12%. Unexpected bribes and fees another 10%. That's 45% gone before accounting for cargo lost to theft, damage or abandonment. The military took 30% of remaining cargo. Bandits took the rest. I'm left with 0 cargo and 100% of initial debt. The mathematics are devastating. Even without catastrophic losses, profit margins are thin. With normal Silk Road attrition, the acceptable losses from standard tribute and taxes, you're making maybe 20% profit. A single major disaster erases that profit and plunges you into debt that takes years to escape. Why do people keep trying, you ask, though you're starting to understand? Because some years you get lucky, Chen explains. Minimal bandit activity, stable politics, high market demand. Those years you make 40 or 50% profit. You hear stories of merchants making 3 successful journeys and retiring wealthy. It happens, just rarely. Most of us are chasing that dream while drowning in debt from the failed attempts. The Kashgar woman adds, also, for some people there are no alternatives. I'm a widow with no sons, no family business, no property. My options are attempt Silk Road trade, work as a servant, or marry someone who will likely beat me and take my earnings. The Silk Road might kill me, but at least I choose my own death. There's freedom in that, even if the freedom is mostly choosing which disaster claims you. You think about your own motivations for this journey, probably some naive combination of adventure-seeking and economic opportunity. Now you understand. Adventure is what people who survive call their suffering. An economic opportunity is a lottery where most players lose their stakes. Chen closes his ledger with finality. I'll report the loss to my creditors, negotiate repayment terms, and plan the next journey. Maybe spring, when political conditions stabilize, maybe never. But probably spring, because what else would I do? It's the Silk Road's trap. The economics are terrible, the risks are catastrophic, the odds are against you. But for many people it's still the best available option. Not because it's good, but because alternatives are worse. That night, merchants round the campfire share their stories. One made 4 trips, broke even on 3, profited once. Another made 6 trips, all losses, still planning a 7th. A third inherited his father's Silk Road debt and is working it off through employment on caravans, essentially enslaved to creditors while technically free. The pattern becomes clear. The Silk Road isn't primarily about individual merchants getting rich. It's about a system that extracts value from desperate gamblers who have no better options. The occasional success story keeps the system functioning, but the foundation is built on accumulated failures. Historians still argue whether this system was sustainable or inherently exploitative. The answer is probably both. It moved goods across continents, connected cultures, and enabled trade that wouldn't otherwise exist. It also destroyed countless lives, created perpetual debt cycles, and enriched a small elite while impoverishing the majority who attempted it. You think about your own balance sheet. You invested time, health, pieces of your sanity, and came away with what? Survival. Experience. Understanding that the romantic Silk Road of popular imagination is a lie covering brutal economics. The Kashgar woman sees you calculating and offers her wisdom. Don't think about the money. Money is abstraction. Think about what you learned. You survived deserts, mountains, disease, bandits, war, and economics that are designed to destroy you. That knowledge has value, even if it's not denominated in silver. Whether you use that knowledge to try again or to warn others away, that's your choice. It's the first time anyone's acknowledged you have a choice. For 2 months you've been following orders, reacting to disasters, surviving moment to moment. The possibility of actual agency feels strange and fragile. Chen interrupts your contemplation with practical reality. Decision time. Return journey requires 50 more days minimum. I can pay minimal wages, offer percentage of future profits if I ever make any, and provide basic food and protection. Or you leave at the next settlement, find other employment, accept that this journey was education rather than profit. Your choice. You look around at the caravan, smaller now, diminished, held together by debt and desperation, and the stubborn refusal to admit defeat. These people are still walking, still planning next journeys, still believing in small chances. The Silk Road's final lesson: it doesn't break you with one dramatic disaster. It breaks you economically, gradually, through 1,000 small extractions that leave you poorer but still functional, still hoping, still gambling on the next journey being different. And somehow people keep gambling, because the alternative is admitting the house always wins, and that admission feels like death. You make your decision, but that's a story for another time. Right now, you're still walking east, still in debt, still calculating impossible mathematics, still on the Silk Road, where survival is the only profit that matters. You're 73 days into the journey when you finally understand why anyone would do this twice. It happens at dawn near Dunhuang, where the caravan stops at the same oasis where you once drank contaminated water and considered it a blessing. The sun rises over dunes you recognize, painting them in shades of amber and rose, and something shifts in your perception. The horror is still there. You haven't forgotten the deaths, the disease, the casual brutality of mountains and men. But you're seeing it differently now, through eyes that have adapted to a world where survival is achievement and comfort is fantasy. You've recalibrated your expectations so thoroughly that reaching this oasis alive feels like victory, even though you're broken, and barely functional. The Kashgar woman notices your expression. You're getting it, she observes. The madness, the reason people come back. You want to deny it, but she's right. Despite everything, maybe because of everything, there's something seductive about having survived what kills most people. You've walked through fire and emerged scarred but breathing. That's a story. That's proof of something, even if you're not sure what. Chen gathers the remaining caravan that evening, 14 people out of the original 40 who left Xi'an. The losses are staggering. 26 people dead, enslaved or abandoned. Every survivor carries injuries visible and invisible. Zhang lost 3 toes to frostbite. The Kashgar woman developed a persistent cough from mountain exposure. You have chronic digestive issues from the food poisoning, a scar on your leg from an infected blister, and nightmares that wake you gasping. But you're here, against mathematics that suggested otherwise. You're still here. The mainstream historical fact. Silk Road merchants who completed even one full journey formed an elite brotherhood bonded by shared trauma. They had survived what most people never attempted. This created a self-selecting group of either the bravest, the most desperate, or the most psychologically damaged individuals, possibly all three. The distinction between courage and madness became meaningless somewhere around the second mountain pass or third near-death experience. Chen addresses the group in Mandarin, which gets translated into Persian and Turkic. We're 3 weeks from Xi'an. Most of you have no money, no cargo, and significant debts. I'm offering employment on my next caravan, assuming I can organize one, assuming my creditors don't literally own me. Standard wages, percentage of profits if there are any. Or you take your experience and hire on with other merchants. Either way, you're Silk Road survivors now. That means something in trading communities. It does mean something. You've noticed how people in settlements look at proven Silk Road travellers, mixture of respect and suspicion, acknowledgement that you've passed through trials they couldn't imagine. It's not quite celebrity, but it's recognition. Your suffering has currency, even if that currency doesn't pay debts. Zhang speaks up. I'm going again. Lost everything this time, but I know the routes now, know the languages better, know which guides to trust. Next journey, I'll do better. It's the gambler's fallacy, the belief that past losses predict future wins, but several others nod agreement. They're planning to return to the thing that nearly killed them, chasing redemption or profit or just the clarity that comes from having a purpose, even if that purpose is walking toward probable disaster. A quirky detail that explains the addiction. Silk Road survivors often reported feeling disconnected from normal civilian life after returning home. Everything seemed trivial compared to the existential stakes of the journey. Family disputes about inheritance or business decisions felt absurd to someone who'd watched people die from bad water. This alienation drove many merchants back onto the road, not because they loved it, but because they couldn't function in a world where survival wasn't constantly questioned. Historians still argue whether this was a form of traumatic stress, or whether the Silk Road genuinely did make normal life seem meaningless by comparison. The Kashgar woman shares her perspective. I'll rest 6 months, let my body recover, settle debts where possible, see my daughter who's being raised by relatives who think I'm insane. Then I'll join another caravan, not because I want to, because staying home means living in a cage built from other people's expectations. The Silk Road is horrible, but at least it's honest horror. You know what threatens you. Not like civilian life, where dangers hide behind smiles and family obligations. You understand her completely. There's a strange purity to Silk Road suffering. It's transparent. When a bandit demands tribute, he's not pretending it's for your own good, or part of social obligation. He's robbing you, and everyone acknowledges the transaction honestly. The conversation continues around the fire, each person processing their trauma differently. Some are planning immediate return journeys. Others are considering different routes, maybe the maritime Silk Road through southern seas, maybe overland routes through different territories. A few are admitting defeat, planning to return home and never leave again. But even those planning to quit speak with a mixture of relief and regret. They survived the ultimate test and are choosing to never test themselves again. Is that wisdom or cowardice? The Silk Road doesn't judge, it just sorts people into categories. Those who return, those who die, and those who survive once and spend the rest of their lives wondering if they're brave for stopping or weak for not continuing. You're still processing your own decision. Chen's offer of employment is genuine but grim. Poverty wages, dangerous conditions, high probability of death or debt. The alternative is returning home with nothing but stories, trying to reintegrate into a life that will feel small and constrained after 2 months of existential extremes. Historians still argue whether Silk Road trade was worth the human cost. The goods that flowed, silk, spices, ideas, technologies, changed civilizations. Buddhism travelled these routes, papermaking, gunpowder, cultural exchanges that shaped human history. But those exchanges were written in blood and broken bodies, and lives destroyed by economic mathematics designed to extract value from desperation. The dawn breaks over Dunhuang, your 74th day on the Silk Road. You've survived plague, mountains, bandits, war, starvation, temperature extremes, psychological warfare, economic catastrophe, and your own body's betrayal. You're alive, which is statistically improbable and emotionally complicated. The caravan prepares to move out for the day's march. Fewer camels, fewer people, fewer dreams, but still moving, because movement is the only response the Silk Road understands. Stop moving and you die. Keep moving and you might die anyway, but at least you die trying. You check your minimal belongings, adjust your patched clothing, and take your place in the diminished line. The hierarchy still exists, but it's looser now. Survivors respect each other in ways that transcend the old categories of newcomer and veteran. You've all paid the entrance fee written in suffering. 3 weeks to Xi'an. 3 weeks to decide what comes next. 3 weeks to process whether the Silk Road broke you or made you into something different. Something adapted to extremes, unable to tolerate the mundane, addicted to survival as its own reward. The Kashgar woman falls into step beside you. Neither of you speaks. There's nothing left to say that hasn't already been communicated through shared experience. You've survived together. That's a bond stronger than friendship, deeper than family, more permanent than any contract. The sun climbs higher, heat building toward the familiar oppressive levels. Your body knows this routine now, the morning cold giving way to noon fire, the afternoon march toward evening camps, the night watches against threats that might or might not materialize. You're walking east, toward home, toward debts and decisions, and the complicated question of whether surviving the Silk Road means you won or lost. The answer is probably both. You survived, which is winning. You're destroyed, which is losing. The Silk Road specializes in paradoxes. Do you remember the person who left Xi'an 74 days ago? That naive adventurer who thought they could handle this? You barely recognized them. They died somewhere in the desert or the mountains, and someone else, harder, more damaged, more real, emerged to take their place. The camel rope is rough in your hands, your feet hurt, your stomach is uncertain, your mind cycles through images you'll never forget. Bodies in sand, chains in markets, voices in darkness, peaks that scraped sky. But you're walking, still walking, the Silk Road's final gift and curse. You can't stop walking even when there's nowhere left to go. The miles accumulate slowly, each one a small battle won against inertia and despair. The landscape grows more familiar as you approach Xi'an, the deserts giving way to scrubland, then farmland, then the first signs of civilization that don't feel actively hostile. You pass other caravans heading west, fresh and optimistic, their merchants still believing in profitable ventures and manageable risks. You want to warn them, but what would you say? Turn back, it's worse than you imagine. They wouldn't listen. You wouldn't have listened. Some lessons can only be learned through direct suffering. The Kashgar woman notices you watching the westbound merchants. Let them go, she says quietly. They need to learn for themselves, just like we did, just like the next wave will. The system perpetuates itself through ignorance and hope. Each generation of merchants learns the same brutal lessons, pays the same costs, survives or dies, according to the same unforgiving mathematics. Nothing changes except the names on the graves. Chen announces that evening that you'll reach Xi'an in 3 days. The mood in camp shifts, mixture of relief and anxiety. Relief at journey's end, anxiety about facing creditors, explaining losses, confronting the economic wreckage of failed ventures. You lie down for your second to last night on the road, and you realize you're not ready for it to end. Not because you've enjoyed it, you haven't, but because endings force conclusions, and you're not ready to conclude whether this experience destroyed you or saved you from something worse. The stars are familiar now. You've memorized their positions, used them for navigation, watched them wheel through countless sleepless nights. They'll keep wheeling after you're gone, indifferent witnesses to human struggles played out beneath their cold light. The Silk Road continues whether you're on it or not. Tomorrow, caravans will face the same disasters you faced. Some will survive, most won't. The mathematics remain unchanged, the suffering renewable, the system self-sustaining. You close your eyes and drift towards sleep, your mind already planning tomorrow's march, checking supplies, calculating distances, habits so ingrained they feel like personality now. The Silk Road has taught you everything. How to survive, how to suffer, how to keep walking when stopping seems preferable. Whether that education was worth the tuition remains the question you'll spend years trying to answer. But for now, for tonight, you're still here, still breathing, still walking toward whatever comes next. The Silk Road's final lesson is simple and devastating. You survive not because you're strong, but because stopping is unthinkable. So you don't stop. You keep walking, because that's what the Silk Road demands and what it makes you capable of delivering. And somewhere in that capability, in the refusal to quit despite every rational reason to do so, you've become exactly the kind of person the Silk Road needs, damaged enough to accept its brutality, resilient enough to continue anyway, and just desperate or mad enough to consider doing it all again. The mountains behind you, the deserts crossed, the deaths witnessed, the survival earned. This is your story. And it's the story of thousands before you and thousands yet to come. The Silk Road doesn't care about individuals. It cares about the endless renewal of desperate people willing to gamble everything on impossible odds. You're one of them now. Forever. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of distant Xi'an, smoke and humanity, and the complicated promise of home that might not feel like home anymore. You breathe deeply, feeling your damaged lungs expand, and you prepare for the final days of walking. Almost there. Almost done. Almost able to rest and process and decide what kind of person emerges from this crucible. The Kashgar woman's breathing deepens into sleep beside you. Zhang mutters something in his dreams. Chen sits by dying coals, updating his ledger by moonlight, calculating losses that will shape his next decade. And you lie there, between past and future, damaged and surviving, forever changed by the road that breaks everyone it doesn't kill. Sweet dreams, traveller. You've earned them. even if they're haunted by singing sands and phantom voices and the faces of those who didn't make it. You survived the Silk Road. That's enough. That's everything. That's the only victory that matters in a world designed to defeat you. Close your eyes now. Rest. Tomorrow you walk the final miles. Tonight let the Silk Road release its grip, even if just for these few hours before dawn. You've earned this rest, this peace, this moment of stillness before whatever comes next. This Silk Road is behind you. Almost. Nearly. Soon. And with its ending comes the beginning of understanding what it cost and what it gave and whether the exchange was ever worth making. But those questions are for tomorrow. Tonight, you sleep. Because sleeping is surviving. And surviving is winning. And winning on the Silk Road is measured in breaths you're still taking when so many others stopped. Breathe, rest, dream of home, or mountains, or nothing at all. You've walked far enough for one journey. The next one, if there is a next one, can wait for morning. For now, let the desert release you. Let the stars keep watch. Let your body remember what safety feels like, even if that memory is temporary, fragile, and ultimately insufficient preparation for the next time you're tempted to walk the road that doesn't end.